This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. I heard that, Fred. Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Town of Darien Zoning Board of Appeals. It is Wednesday, July 14th, 2021. I will point out this evening that we have several applications, a couple of which are very complicated. So we would appreciate, as Mr. Green pointed out a moment ago, on being direct, giving us your hardships, keeping it short, and we'll go from there. Okay, we are now, contrary to my opening remarks prior to this time, we are going to go in order of the agenda as posted, legally posted. Okay. Any questions, comments at this time? Terrific. We're going to start with calendar number 8, 2021, the application of Shannon and Jonathan Silsby to allow the construction of a one-story addition at the residence known as 42 Mansfield Avenue. Ms. Silsby, I will turn that over to you, please.
Okay. I am going to share my screen, Fred, per your direction earlier today. Unless you've already loaded my deck, I'll share it from my computer.
Yes, you can go ahead and share it from your computer.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you announce who's on this matter?
Yes, I will. Yep, thank you, Gary. Yes, I'm sorry. Sitting for this application, the Silsby application, calendar number 8, 2021, will be Jeff Williams, acting chair, Gary Green, Mike Netter, Barb Hazelton, and Dan Nelwad. Ms. Silsby?
Yep, I'm here. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay.
Take your time. Well,
yep.
I shouldn't say take your time tonight, Gary. Sorry.
Yeah. I will.
Oh, there you go.
Can you see it?
Right. I don't, but that doesn't mean anything. Get anybody else?
Anyone see it? I'm assuming no.
Let me try something for let me try something for you, Shannon. No, we cannot see your screen.
Okay.
You see a pop-up on your screen that's allowing you to share your screen?
I see open system preferences, which I've clicked. Is that correct, Fred?
No, it should just give you the pop-up indicating
yeah,
you'd like to share
I've used
your
that
screen.
before, but I don't see it. Fred, can you pop it up?
I'm gonna need a minute. I'm gonna need a minute to go get it.
Okay, I have it up if we can sort through the sharing. I can, well, I'll give him a minute and then I could start.
We have hard copies of all of the data, so if you can, maybe you can get started and just reference what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So thank you for your time. 42 Mansfield Avenue has been our home for almost 18 years next month. We're raising 4 kids, multiple dogs in this lovely house that actually was the farmhouse for an apple orchard that stretched down Highland. We're only the 5th family to live here. And 14 years ago, we thought we've got to fix this kitchen. And it's a tough spot it's a tough location. It's an amazing house with an amazing heart, but definitely a tough spot. We finally have cracked the code as to how to do it and do it mindfully with the minimum adjustment possible, really mindful of our neighborhood and our neighbors, and to also keep in with the history of the house. So we're here tonight to ask for 2 variances, one along our side, the only side border we have, which is with 5 Highland. We're asking for a 6'6" setback instead of the 10 required. We'll talk to you about why. And we're asking for a front variance along Highland Avenue. Highland is considered front for us. Sorry? okay? And that's a 24-foot request in lieu of 30. And again, the reason we're doing this is to renovate the kitchen and then also improve the access, the door access. And if any of you have come by, you'll see that our main door is on Highland, and we really live on Highland because of where we're positioned on Mansfield. So to that end, we really have 4 hardships that are the principal points that really constrained us in making this improvement to the house. We do have those 3 front property lines, Mansfield, Highland, and Sedgwick. Our one side is our least buildable space, as you've probably seen from the documents. Second is we have tremendous slope. So where we do have the ability to build, we have hills. And so it's just not conducive to extending out towards Sedgwick or out towards Mansfield. Thirdly, we have substantial ledge. Half of the house is in fact built upon it. So again, making it difficult to build. And then finally, accessing the property from a driving perspective, the only way to do that is from Highland. You can't access it from Sedgwick, and you can't access it from Mansfield. So we're really kind of tied in. So those are the 4 hardships. There are, as the documents state, two things we're looking to build. And the first is an improvement, and I'll call it proposed addition 1 in my PowerPoint. And that is literally moving the Highland entrance, closing it from where it is right now, and moving it to a structure that would sit between our existing garage and our house. That is fine, and that wouldn't require a variance, except for the fact that will then attach that entry and slash mudroom now to the existing garage, and that then makes it the 10-foot variance needed. And again, we're asking your approval tonight for that only to be 6.6. Know that, and I have in my PowerPoint, again, the comparison then of what the existing door looks like and what the new door would look like. The impacts of this, want to call them to your attention. One is that right now when you walk in our main door, which is our back door, but is our main door, you walk into a really small 4x5 mudroom, very tall teenage boys, like you can maybe fit 1 in there at a time. But on step 2, you're right in our kitchen and right on top of the oven. So you immediately walk in the house and you're to the hot section of the kitchen. Adding and moving the door will move the door from the hot, so it's a safety thing. Know that secondly, making this move will require us to move our air conditioning units, and those can move behind the garage and stay within setback, which we're pleased with. And we have consulted our heating and cooling companies about that. Thirdly, this will also give us an opportunity to, access the backyard from this new space, and we'll be doing some additional patio and hardscaping to incorporate that. And finally, an impact of this move and this addition between the house and the garage is something we didn't even intend, but actually it will provide us the opportunity to have another entry from this space into our living room and improve the flow of this house tremendously. And if any of you live in an old house or appreciate old houses, you know that the flow of a house built in 1900 definitely worked then, but it's not working as mindfully and as seamlessly and as comfortably now. And really, this application is about, creating a home that families for the next 120 years will really enjoy.
Can I interrupt 1 second? Because I just want to make sure I understand from the drawings that are presented and then the markup that staff did. For your addition number 1, are you adding any volume in the setback? And it doesn't appear that you are. Is that correct?
We're not. We're
So
not.
The only reason why you're here is because of the location of the garage that you're attaching to, but you're not, and only a triangular portion of that garage is in the setback. But then once you attach it,
Yes, it changes.
it changes the setback requirements. I'm sorry. And at that point, Woody, because if I see it right now, the garage is conforming because it meets the 5-foot setback. But once it's attached, the 10-foot setback applies. But even in that case, there's no additional volume even in that 10-foot area. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's
Okay.
correct. That's correct.
Okay. So it's it's a function of attaching the garage to the home that triggers the need for this. And all your discussion about flow, frankly, is interesting, but what I really want to focus on is that fact that you're attaching the garage, and that portion of the addition, which is shaded in red on staff's drawing or pink, is not in the setback.
Correct. Those
We're
are,
not creating a worse situation in the setback.
right.
Well, you are, because the setback changes, Gary.
Well, you're moving a setback, but I'm sorry, you're not creating a worse situation as it relates to neighbors or activity on that property.
Correct.
Like, you may not agree.
Okay. And I only mention those other impacts because, again, they're good to know that the move creates some goodness and it wasn't intended.
We appreciate that very much, Ms. Silsby. We're just trying to focus on the actual variance request, and Mr. Green is correct in pointing that out, and I appreciate his comments. So I think there's a pretty good understanding here of what the hardships are, what you're looking for, and I would at this time ask, and I want to say, if you have anything further to add, please feel free.
I do.
I think
There's a second addition here, which is the second request. So I could do that just top line. So it is on the Highland side, and where we're asking for 24 feet in lieu of 30. And it is, as you know, there's a existing, and I love what he's word, somewhat clunky mudroom that was built, well prior to the 1930 zoning guidelines going into play. We would love to extend that. Again, it's over the setback right now. So extend that to where you see the drawings. It would look a little bit more in line with the home. It would provide us space in the kitchen to fully renovate the kitchen. But again, what it does is require your approval of 24 feet in lieu of 30 on that Highland space and on that Highland front setback.
And so what's the hardship associated with that, and why is this minimal adjustment necessary?
Could you say that again? What's the hardship and what?
Why is this the minimal adjustment necessary to address that particular hardship?
So the hardship is, again, we have three fronts. This is considered our third front. It is our most buildable. It's where we could really build, and it really is where we considered building for many, many years, but did not want to bring to this board, and Woody reviewed a much larger addition that would come all the way off this, an additional 10 plus feet into the setback. Didn't feel that that was appropriate from a volume perspective or from a neighbor and flow perspective. What we want to do and why we're asking this actual space is somewhat of a hardship. It is, it's 5x4, so not very useful. In extending it, it does make it a bit more useful in a kitchen that was built in 1900. The space was a 1900 space and has never been expanded. And taking it from the 7 feet along the same line that exists today, the 16 feet, and opening up the kitchen, you doing that while also cleaning up that side of the house. This is the most visible side of the house coming down Mansfield Avenue. We believe is a good way to improve the home while also cleaning up, what is a somewhat of an eyesore of a structure right now.
Okay, thank you. Questions and comments from the board? No, I'm not hearing any.
Yeah.
No.
Hey, Woody, do we have any feedback from the neighbors?
Yes, we do, from two neighbors that are across the roads, across Highland and across Mansfield. So the addition on the Highland side, the direct opposite the road neighbor there has approved. We haven't heard from the Highland neighbor that's immediately next door.
Hi, this is Denise Bagliotti. I'm the 5 Highland neighbor, and we do approve.
There you go.
Okay. Well, and that settles that.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, Barb Hazelton, I have a question. Per staff notes, is the garage structure going to be preserved? Or are you going to make changes to the garage?
Nope, it will be preserved. Full of bikes and lawnmowers. And, but to
Okay.
that end, Barb, you bring up a really good point, which is the other positive change we'll be able to make is widening the driveway to take some of the volume of parking off of Highland. It's a tough road if you've ever traveled it. And with this, moving the door to between the garage and the house, that will allow us to widen the driveway just to 20 feet, which is an ideal width per our research, and take some volume off, which will be nice for the neighborhood. Improve safety.
And any landscaping improvements as part of
Yes.
this?
Absolutely, good question as well. We plan to greenscape, and you know, this was an apple farm, so potentially using something along those lines, maybe planting an apple tree here or there, but also taking advantage of, you know, understanding how drainage changes and using plants, for instance, that would be, you know, moisture loving. So we'll be really mindful of how we do that. Number one, for neighbors, and number two, for, again, you know, the age of the home, and really preserving and celebrating the age of the home.
I'm good.
Okay. I was just gonna ask that. Thanks, Barb. Appreciate your input.
Love to
Jeff,
volunteer that.
I have a minute. Did you explore any alternative design plans for
Yes.
this project?
So the main alternative was doing a much heavier, larger build out the Highland side. And again, we did abandon that because it was not as pleasing to the eye, really probably not as interesting and attractive for our neighbors. We would literally be coming right out onto the street. It would be a much larger variance to ask you for. And from a volume perspective, it was just not as mindful. This recommendation only takes our total coverage up just slightly over 1%, 1.08%, from 12 to 13.08. And so it's a really, that was the smallest, most mindful way to achieve these two objectives.
Okay, and there's a wood platform and steps that are going to be removed. Is that
Yes.
volume equal to, greater than, less than the volume you're adding into the setback?
It's less, excuse me, volume to the step. It is probably just slightly less than. We can check those measures, but probably almost equal, but just slightly less than.
Okay, because one of the things we can look at is a reduction in a nonconformity as a means for approving a variance. You know, our job is to try and create less need for variances and sort of clean up, you know, things that require variances. And, you know, quite frankly, a lot of times in projects like this, we see building envelopes that are usually a lot smaller or not even proximate to where, you know, the residence is. In this case, there's still a fairly large building envelope. I mean, that entire patio area is all within the building setbacks, as well as the new patio area. So on the front addition, I guess, or the Highland Ave side addition, you know, if you were telling me that we were actually reducing the nonconformity by doing this, I'd be a lot more comfortable with it. I don't know if that's data that you can get, or Woody, if you've done any math on that.
So it's a good question. And those steps measure right here. That's not a measure. Yeah, let's see that. We could get that as a follow-up.
Okay, and then Woody, how far apart does I think there's a minimum distance the garage has to be from the structure, right? To be an accessory structure?
Yes, that's 5 feet. So-
And what is it currently?
More than 5 feet, but I'd have to pull the plan and measure. So it currently qualifies as accessory. This connection, of course, it would not.
I'd just be curious to see what a 5-foot separation would look like to make that a conforming addition. I mean, Gary, you made the point. I don't know where you are. There you are. You made the point that it's an otherwise conforming addition, but what does it look like with that 5-foot buffer space that was intended? You know,
You're maintaining the garage as a detached garage.
correct. I mean, you could theoretically do a longer, narrower addition and be completely conforming and get the same volume. But I don't know, Jeff, I'm not trying to make your life more difficult, but I don't know how you want to proceed. I would like to know, you know, those volumes, and I'd like to see what the 5-foot space looks like to get comfortable with it with an application like this. Because like I said, we're really not in the business of creating more non-conforming properties.
I understand your point.
So we're already non-conforming though, right, Mike? We're already a non-conforming property because the house was built before there were variance rules.
Yes,
Well,
but we're not in the business of making it more non-conforming.
No, but it looks like well, what's non-conforming now other than that one portion on Highland Avenue?
The garage.
No, not now. The garage is conforming as it's
As an accessory structure, yeah.
an accessory structure. So I don't understand how it's currently non-conforming. I think it's currently
No,
conforming.
it currently is conforming. I agree with you. But once you grant
Right now,
that,
the applicant suggested that it's currently non-conforming.
No, it's not. Well,
no,
right now,
the addition on the front on Highland.
Other than the addition on the front end Highland, it is conforming.
excuse me, I'm speaking specifically about Highland. The garage is completely conforming. We're on the same.
Right. Other than the addition on Highland, other than that portion on Highland, I don't mean addition, the current portion, it's conforming. So Mike makes an interesting point. And you know, you might want to investigate that before we take this to a vote.
Investigate what? I'm sorry.
What Mike suggested is, can you create an addition that doesn't attach the garage?
Right. So we have nowhere else to do that. As we stated earlier, we have slope down Mansfield. We've got ledge out Sedgwick. There's really, those are our hardships are exacerbated by the fact we have 3 fronts. So yes, we have.
Think about the 3 front setbacks. I mean, it is unusual to have 3. 2 is not unusual, but that's frankly, that's something P&Z can take care of. Their regulations say that's what the setbacks are.
Well,
Change the regulations. If they didn't mean corner lots to be treated that way, they could have drafted their regulations accordingly. Now,
that's why I'm here, Gary, asking for you to give us so I don't
I
understand.
understand, but you're asking us to vary something that may be quite intentional by the zoning regs and therefore not a hardship.
Well, 3, you said 2
It's
common,
unusual.
2 is,
Unusual.
sorry, Gary.
We need to think about that. But Mike points out something that you should consider is that we have a conforming house, and what you're asking for is turning it into a non-conforming. And like 99% of this house is conforming. Just something to think about. I've kind of hinted where I am with the garage, but
You know, we've started the project 14. We started thinking about this 14 years ago. It's why it's taken us so long to figure out how to do this mindfully.
Yep.
with the minimal adjustments necessary based upon all of the constraints we have. And I get your point about corner lots being fronts. Having 3 of them that are all, you know,
I agree
2
that
that
that's
are very, I'm sorry,
I agree that that's usual.
2 that are, I'll just finish. 2 that are, you can't even build upon them. You can't build upon Mansfield and you can't build upon Sedgwick. They're unbuildable. So then we're left with 2, one a front that we're asking you about here because it really is the only option. And to be honest, Gary and full team, we were going to be bringing a much bigger structure out that direction, but we thought it's just not smart. It's just not, it's not the most minimal way to do this, which is why we brought you something much smaller. So we did do our homework and we have investigated, to your point, Mike, how to do this, in the most minimal way. And this literally is the best idea that has come up in 14 years.
Okay. Okay, Barb and Dan, do you have any thoughts here?
I have thoughts, but I think they've all been answered. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm clear on what you guys have asked and I mean, as a realtor, I love, this makes a lot of sense, but I agree with Mike and Gary's comments. It is, our job as a board is to make things more conforming, not less. So I appreciate Shannon. This is a great plan. I like it. I keep looking at it.
Good.
It's tough as a board. We never really give something without taking something. And this is kind of a tricky one.
Yeah, and I think our good point, it's also a house that was built to live in 120 years ago, and no one's ever asked to change anything until now, which I think is also a really important point. And it really is about making it livable for the next 120 because it's not right now. It's challenging.
Do you know the distance, to Mike's point, do you know the distance between the garage and the house now?
So the physical distance between the garage and the house. Oh, yeah, I do. And I hope, and my husband's just gonna run out and measure.
I think that was your question, right?
Yeah, it was. Yes.
Mike, have you ever seen it? Have you ever been here? Have you ever seen it in person?
I drive past your house every day.
But on Mansfield, right? Do you know it from the Highland side?
Sedgwick, Mansfield, and Highland, yes. I've been on all 3 sides of that.
I'm sure. I just wondered how many? 10 and a half feet to answer the question, the distance between the 2 structures.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at the survey.
Yeah.
I'm seeing 7 feet to some kind of bump out on the house. It
That's
looks
the
like
chimney.
a chimney shape, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the closest point between that chimney and the garage is about 7 feet to scale.
Okay.
And the house to the garage is 10 and a half. Yep.
Yeah, Jeff, I think you have a sense of where I am on this.
Yeah, I do. And I think I know where Gary is as well. So, well, I don't mean to presume, Gary, but all right. Shannon, I'll go with Shannon since you're calling everybody by their first name. So if you don't mind, I'll just go with
Please,
Shannon.
it's fine.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So Shannon, look, there's a possibility that the board may have some thoughts on this, and I may suggest that we may continue, or you may want to continue this and speak with staff relative to board's questions and comments and see how you may be able to address those. But that's entirely up to you. I didn't mean to cut you off after proposal number 1. I just wanted to end proposal 1 to get to proposal 2. That's a good thing. But yeah, so do you have any other further comment on proposal number 2? Just want to make sure you're good.
No.
Okay, you're fine. Okay, then, you know, I rarely do this, but if you'd like me to continue it so you can confer with staff on addressing the issues that have been spoken about this evening, I'm happy to do that.
Yep. And I guess my only question, again, having not done this before, and this house has never in 120 years asked for anything to make it more livable. Woody, are you able to weigh in? You, our staff, I guess, and that's why I guess I would come see to talk about it further. Are you able to weigh in here at all? Or again, would it be you I'd pick this back up with?
It would be best if you met with Woody. It would be better that I continue the hearing and that you meet with him privately offline.
Well,
And then
what we might be able to do, excuse me, what we might be able to do is explore how an addition to the main body of the house could be done within that 7 to 10 feet, whatever, leaving 5 feet as the separation. Or perhaps scaling back the kitchen addition too. So it would just be a matter of exploring alternatives with plans and maybe your architect.
And then we're not able to do that then until September, right? Just to understand the logistics, to come back.
Yes, the next meeting is September 22nd, and you would essentially be put on that agenda. That is correct.
And that's really our only option. Say asking you to vote on it tonight.
Well, we could vote on it. Obviously, I can close it, and then we'll vote on it after all the hearings are completed. But then, of course, you know, I hate to put it this way, but you run the risk of not getting what you want this evening, and then you have to, you know, withdraw the application has a possibility. I'm not speaking for the board, but it has a possibility of being denied. And then if it's denied, then you have to rework the whole thing. You can't submit the same plan. So yeah, it needs to be reworked. So, so at this point, if we continue it, you can continue using the same thought process and everything, just tweak it a little bit and come back and tell us, you know, how you tweaked it. And you know, we will have a better understanding at that time. That decision's yours. It's essentially rolling in place or not.
Sorry, Jeff, someone spoke and I couldn't hear you.
I was just thinking you have nothing to lose by getting us to a vote if your alternative is to create a conforming plan.
I guess that's true.
Conforming plan, then we don't need you.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
That's exactly
yeah.
right.
Thank you very much.
Could we, Gary, that's a good point, but not the goal here. So, because again, you know, bringing an old house up to modern day is not easy. That's why it's taken us so long to come to a plan. And to ask for such minimal adjustments, I'm actually quite surprised. So we'll continue it, and I invite you to come over and sit with it and look at it with us. Gary, Mike, come and see this, and see what it's like to attempt to bring it up to so it's really livable for the next 120 years, which is what we've tried to do.
Yeah, I don't think, you know, my questions are just sort of basic, you know, and you know, Woody, maybe this is the type of question that we should be asking applicants before they get in front of us, because, you know, we should know the reduction in the stairs. We should know that volume and what that reduction is. And if that matches up to what they're adding on the Highland side, it seems like a no-brainer. But we don't know the math on it, so you can't make that decision. And then, you know, talking about what it looks like to do an addition that's 5 feet separated from the garage is not, I mean, that's not out of the norm for questions that we ask. Like, what is actually a conforming project look like? I don't know. It may be ridiculous. I mean, it may be the most ridiculous construction project ever done, but until I have that info. And so, yeah. Jeff, I think that's really what I'm looking for. It's just the information. She doesn't need to go crazy and spend a ton of money on architects, and, you know, just get me some drawings that show dimensions and where these things fit, what it looks like. You know, you don't have to go and redesign your entire house. So just trying to figure out what, you know, it's our job to try and reduce nonconformities, and you're taking out a stairway that's in a non-conforming location, so that's a good thing, right? So if you're trading that for a little bit more volume on that Highland side, okay, maybe that's probably a good thing. And then just doing our due diligence on the addition, what that looks like.
Yep.
And if I'm in the minority here, you take it to a vote, Jeff.
I think there's a presumption on how we vote, which I don't think is fair to make. But I think what Mike's asking for is help us reach a decision that's favorable to you by showing us the alternatives.
Right. And again, the alternative that we brought was the huge structure out Highland. That was the one we considered, actually. Again, didn't bring the other nuance, to your point, Mike. And thank you. That was very clearly described. I appreciate that. But yeah, that would have been helpful, because as Woody will tell you, we have worked diligently to cover every possible stone to come to you once, because your time is valuable and I'm taking up way too much of it as you've got a full agenda. But I have literally, Mike, turned over every single option to be prepared to come here tonight. And Woody will tell you that.
Okay, and we appreciate that due diligence. Believe me, we do. So I think what Mike is asking for is reasonable. So, and I think you have a clear understanding of what he's asking for. So actually, it's really not that complicated to do.
And I'm assuming, Jeff, that you'll have meeting notes as well, which will put everyone on the same page, literally, so that we can have that in,
100%.
Crystal clear for everyone.
100%.
Don't ask you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll actually have a recording of this too.
Yeah.
And there could be a change in membership in which another member would have to be prepared by reviewing tonight. So I gather we're going to continue with Ms. Silsby's approval to September 22.
That is correct.
Right.
Okay, without any further comment or questions from the board, I am going to continue this application and hearing until September 22nd. Okay?
Thank you all.
Okay.
Jeff, do you want to just see if there's any public comment?
Of course I do. As Mr. Netter has pointed out, is anybody from the public that makes like comment on this application? And I'll take that as a no. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
Thank you very much for your time and effort. All right. Okay. Mr. Corbo, can you do me a favor and put yourself on mute? Just hit that mute button. That's terrific. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move to the next application, which is calendar number 9, 2021. We're going to have a little rotation in seating here, and Mike Netter is going to step aside for a brief moment, and Bill Hazard was going to step in. So for the record, hearing this application, calendar number 8, 2021 from Shannon, and excuse me, calendar number 9, 2021, the application of 1918 to allow the second floor apartment to remain with building alterations and additions. On the board hearing this matter is Jeff Williams as chair, and Gary Green, Dan Nalawad, Barb Hazelton, and Bill Hesser. And that is for the record. Okay? All right. So as stated, this property is at 1918 Boston Post Road to allow the second floor apartment to remain with building alterations and applications. And for the application, for the applicant, excuse me, is Bob Madison. Excuse me. Sorry, Bob. 30 years and I almost forgot. But go ahead, Bob. We're set for you to go. And Bob, let me just start off by saying that this application has got some serious history to it, and and we've all read it, so I don't need to hear the entire history of what's gone on in this apartment, but I would like to hear your arguments or your position on how this all occurred, why it all occurred, and why there were several opportunities for this to be rectified as the resident was instructed to do. by the fire marshal and others, and that never occurred. And I believe that she was instructed at least 3 occasions, and nothing has happened with that. So why don't you go ahead and you know, give it your best shot on explaining the situation to us and where we are, and be direct, please, and then give us, you know, the hardships associated, please. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I have my PowerPoint up, and just want to make sure you're able to see the screen that I picked here. I'm not quite
I'm
sure.
seeing motorcycle.
No, wrong one. How do I share the other?
You had it up a second ago.
Yeah, and I don't know what happened to it. Let's try. Huh. Fred, can you take it away and give it back to me, and something must have happened.
Yeah, let me see what I can do.
Okay. Okay, now I have nothing here shared, so I guess you have to send me the control, I guess, and then I'll pick the slideshow. Okay, screen. All right. Now. Okay. This should be here. Okay. Is this picking? That's picking up the wrong screen. Hold on. Oops, I don't want to do that. Screen. Okay. Let me try one other thing here. Screen. For some reason, I'm not picking this up right.
Maybe move the PowerPoint presentation over to the other screen.
Yeah, I'm trying. I got everything on that, and for some reason, it's just not picking it up. But let me do it this way. PowerPoint, this, that. All right, well.
Let me see if I can grab this for you, Bob.
All right.
Got it.
Is that the,
It's the overhead.
it's
Google
my,
Earth.
all right, it's still on the wrong thing, but let me work with that. Let me do this. All right, is this work now? Screen sharing is paused. Oh,
Well, now it's gone.
okay. Fred, one more time. I usually don't have a problem, but let's see. Okay, that is the wrong thing, but I'll have to get the right thing up here. PowerPoint. All right. Okay, is this look like a PowerPoint slide now?
I don't see anything.
Oof. Share. How about now?
Yes, I got calendar number 9.
All right, yeah, now I'm in. Okay. All right, sorry for that. I don't know what happened here, but okay. For the record, Robert Maslin, I represent the applicant, which is 1918 LLC, which is the current owner of 1918 Post Road. I put together the PowerPoint, and what I'd like to try to focus on just for a moment is what is really being requested here. I know there's a history, there's an existing unapproved or illegal apartment in the second level, but I'd like you to try to put yourself back in 2007 for a moment and ask whether, if the applicant at that time, which was a different LLC, had requested the upstairs to be used as a one-bedroom apartment rather than any commercial use, would you have approved it? I think the simple analytical answer is the storage required 2 parking spaces under the regs. The one-bedroom apartment would have required 1 space, and it still requires 1 space, so it's a lesser variance. So really what we're doing here is asking for approval of a reduction in the amount of non-conforming spaces by 1. The building itself was approved for the current downstairs use as a showroom for building materials and fixtures. And that is a very low intensity use. At the time the application was made, the property had been vacant for a few years, and the hardship at that time was explained essentially as an existing building, long predated current zoning regulations. It didn't comply with coverage, it didn't comply with parking spaces, but in order to make some use of the building that is consistent with the neighborhood, a low intensity retail showroom type use was approved. And that use is still in place, D&D design. And the rub here is there's a single bedroom dwelling unit upstairs. So if we go through the actual requests, it's either reissue all the variances with a reduction in the number of parking spaces that were being varied, or just amend the application to remove the restriction that limits upstairs use to storage related to the commercial use and allow a single family, rather a single bedroom unit. This aerial photograph.
Can you go through that Hobson's choice again for us?
I'm
Or
sorry?
can we simply just deny this application if we find that it's not appropriate to turn back the clock and revisit the prior decision?
Oh, well, it's a way of analyzing the application. The request is to modify an existing variance by removing the restriction of the use of the second level and allowing a one-bedroom apartment in its place.
But what is the standard for, what is the standard for doing that, Bob? What's the standard for having a board, having an applicant ask us to revise something that was directly on point? There's no question that this was addressed in with a prior board and built into the approval of the variance request at the time. What's the standard for asking a board to revise the prior board's decision?
There's no prohibition against subsequent applications to modify conditions on previous approvals. So there really is no standard. Anyone can file an application to modify a previous approval on any type of zoning.
So what Jeff pointed out to earlier, asked you earlier, then focus on the hardship and why this is a minimal adjustment necessary.
Well, I think somebody mentioned earlier tonight, a reduction in a nonconformity is sufficient without having to find a hardship. But the hardship was already found in 2007 when the board allowed this building to be converted from
Right.
basically an automotive service type use to a retail showroom type establishment with storage on the second floor.
Right, I was gonna say, based upon that finding of hardship, that stipulation was put in that it would be storage and not living.
I kind of disagree with that, and this is why.
Okay.
It's pretty clear from the record that the request was for this retail showroom, and there was no consideration for anything upstairs. There was no request for a dwelling unit upstairs. That could have been included, and if it were included, the parking variance would have been one space less than what the board ultimately approved. So rather than 0 instead of 33 conforming spaces, the variance would have been 0 in lieu of 32 spaces. And coupled with the fact that second story or second floor dwelling units are allowed by special permit in this zone, just as first floor retail and showrooms are allowed by special permit. So this application could have been made in 2007. It wasn't, but there's no reason why you couldn't look at this and say, we're reducing the number of parking space variance, or the number of spaces that we're varying the regulations by one space, and treat that as a reduction in a nonconformity. I understand, and I have no explanation for why this apartment was built, why it was on 3 different occasions cited as fire violations. The fact is, I'm here to try to address this and get an approval in a way that complies with the fire code. The architect who designed this plan has designed it in consultation with the fire marshal's office to make sure that he came up with a plan that is approvable by the fire marshal. So
wait a second, hang on, just wait a second on that one. Are you telling me that the architect consulted with the fire marshal's office back in 2007 when this apartment was built?
No, for this application.
Okay, well, I'm not
sure,
Bob, that the fire marshal is aware that this apartment was built with no building permits whatsoever, no issuance of a certificate of occupancy, but it would seem to me that Bobby Bush would know that, given that fire inspection is always required as well. There's no electrical inspection, there's no plumbing inspection, there's no nothing on this apartment. So it's going to be very difficult for us to, well, for me, to view this thing as being approved as is without sufficient review and inspection of the plans, the way it was built. We have no idea. We have somewhat significant neighbor opposition due to the fact that the building abuts the building next door. There's so many unanswered questions here, Bob. So this is going to be a little bit of an uphill battle. So can I hear, which I'm not too sure that I have yet, can I hear of the hardships related to the creation of this apartment?
We don't need a use variance. The variance we're requesting is for parking spaces based on allowed uses in the building. The apartment is, under the regulations, is allowed by special permit. We have not gone through the special permit process for sure, but it is allowed. This is not a use variance. And it's true that this has gone through a few attempts at enforcement, but those attempts were made by the fire marshal themselves. So they know full well what the history is here. And they've been in communication with the architect in order for the architect to come up with a plan, and that's the plan that's in the application, a plan that would comply with the fire code. And that's the starting point to get.
Why not go through the special use application process?
Pardon me?
Why not go through a special use application process?
We are. That's at the end of my slide presentation. I do say that we have to follow up with an ARB application and a planning and zoning application. All uses in the NB zone require special permits. This has a special permit for the showroom.
Why don't you go there? Why don't you go there first?
We can't, because we need the variance. You can't grant a special permit without the variance. The way the variance is set up now, there's a condition that limits the use of the second level. And so I don't really think it matters.
You don't need a variance, you need a determination from us removing the stipulation.
Well, yes, I framed it as an amendment to the
Right.
earlier
Not a
approval.
variance, right.
But in essence, that's what it is. And as a result of changes in the regulations and the conversion from a space that requires 2 spaces to a space that requires 1, we're reducing the nonconformity, or i.e. the amount of the variance or the scope of the variance. But that's what we're asking for. We're not asking for a new variance. I have it in the application teed up that way if necessary. But really, this is a modification of the 2007 approval by removing, I think it's condition 1 or condition 6. I forget which one, what number paragraph it is, but that's it. And converting.
What is the reasoning? Why should we remove that stipulation? Why should we change a decision that was made by this board? What's the reason?
Because a property owner is entitled to file subsequent applications for the same property to amend earlier approvals.
So you're saying it should be done simply as right?
I'm sorry?
It should be done just as a right by the property owner. So all of our stipulations are subject to a property owner's request to have it removed.
No.
Without any reason other than they want it to be.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay.
What I meant to say, if it didn't come across this way, was a property owner is entitled to file subsequent applications requesting amendments to earlier plans.
Right. And what's the basis of that request in this case? What is it?
To change, because the owner needs to change or wants to change from one special permit use to another special permit use. And in doing so, reduces the parking nonconformity.
So like I said, any applicant can request a change of a stipulation that we put in place because they want to.
Yes.
Okay.
Doesn't mean you have to grant it. But the other point I want to make clear here is there was never a discussion about an apartment on the second level during the 2007 applications. It was always one combined or one use for the entire building.
Did the applicant object to that stipulation?
It was never an issue because, in fact, the applicant, I believe from reading the minutes, it was the applicant's proposal to have the second level for storage.
Okay.
And it was stipulated, Bob, it was stipulated in that resolution, which obviously you read, it was stipulated on 3 separate occasions, that stipulation, that area remains storage only for files, showroom samples, etc. There was no conversation about an apartment whatsoever. And they accepted that stipulation as storage for files, showroom samples, et cetera, et cetera. And it's referenced 3 separate times in that resolution. So I'm with Gary on this. We're trying to get to the bottom line here as to why we should be in a position to change the decision made in 2007, given the application.
Why not? People are entitled to change the use on their property in accordance with regulations.
Okay.
I mean, that's people have a right to do that. How you handle the application is based on the usual considerations in zoning applications generally. But you're allowed to ask for modifications. It happens all the time.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, with the-
people come in, and how many times have you seen more than one variance application for different aspects of a building on a property over time? You start off with one addition, and then several years later, they come back and they want another addition. And you see these happening over time. Just because you get a variance once doesn't mean you're locked into that for all time. You can come back and ask to change it. My point is, in this case, the owner wants to change the approved use on the second level from storage to a lesser intense single bedroom apartment. And I say lesser intense because it requires one space instead of two. And
So Bob, you have been talking about the rights of the owner. I also would like you to explain to us what are the rights of the neighbors. When the original appeal was granted in 2007, there were numerous stipulations that were laid out by the board, which were to be followed by the owner. And there have been a list of breaches to those stipulations. How do you explain those, and why did it happen? Whether there are breaches to, you know, minor infraction like putting blinds on the window, fire alarms going off. How do you explain those?
I think the only significant one is the windows. I don't have an explanation why anything happened until I got involved. And the first thing I got involved in was trying to get this all straightened out and get an approval for what's there. The blacked out windows, I don't understand why that's a condition in the first place. I wasn't part of that discussion. I only have the ability to look at records. But when you look at that property today, if you look out the back window, you're looking at the roof of a garage. I don't understand what the issue was with lighting on the second level when it's a residential property in the back and people have windows on second floors of houses all over. The house,
Yeah,
building to the right of this, commercial building, in a commercial zone. And I mean, you know, if you're inclined to approve this and require that the windows be blacked out with either shades or blinds or whatever, that's fine. But I don't understand why that condition is there in the first place, because I don't see where it accomplishes anything.
Bob, we don't need to stipulate at this point those windows be blacked out. And actually the verbiage is blacked out screens. So I'm not all too sure what a blacked out screen is, but I mean, I can imagine what it is. I was not part of the 2007 decision-making board either, but it's really not, it's not relevant today why that particular board decided, for whatever reason they decided, wanted blacked out windows. They made that decision. It was a stipulation. It was not followed. Yeah. We don't need to re-stipulate that.
Yeah. And Jeff, my point was not to mention any specific violation. It was just the fact of right of the neighbors, right? And the long history of the owner for not following through.
Yes, I completely agree with you, Dan. The history here over the last, 15, 20 years is really not acceptable in my estimation.
Not only is it not acceptable, I mean, we put those stipulations in for the protection of both the applicant and the neighbors. The fact that we have avoided a fire, not once, but potentially 3 times, is so outrageous to me. I just can't believe this. It really concerns me that this has happened.
And it's particularly concerning to me, frankly, Barb, that the building abuts the neighbor, which I believe is Darien Bookgate. And if you're familiar with that building, I don't know what year that building was built, but that thing will go up like a matchbox. I mean, it's a tinderbox. So I'm very uncomfortable with this whole thing. So Bob, please continue, but it's a steep hill, my friend.
I figured it would be. But I keep coming back to the basic question. If you were to review this application in the first instance, requesting 2 uses, retail on the first floor and a single bedroom apartment on the second level, both of which are allowed by special permit, would you have granted it? I know there's a bad history here. There's no question about it. And unfortunately, it took 3 times for the fire marshal to get across the point that you can't have this unpermitted apartment upstairs because of fire safety. There's no, I don't dispute at all that there's been a long history, and it's not a good one.
Well, let me point out a couple of things. Let me point out a couple of things, if I may. Staff, zoning staff, was not aware of this situation until the fall of 2020. We had no idea there was an illegal apartment existing in this building, and the board didn't find out until very recently. So it's not fair to say that the fire marshal was in charge of this, that, and the other thing. The zoning board should have. There was a little bit of a communication breakdown here, which I'm concerned about, but that's my problem. The issue is we were not aware of this situation. We are now aware of the situation, and it's our job to fix it.
And that's why I'm here.
Well, the problem is if you had included this apartment in the first application, there would have been, in my estimation, given the proximity to the building next door. I mean, there's no separation there at all, Bob. If something was to happen, there could be some serious problems. We may have, and I wasn't there that night. I don't know why, but I was on this board in 2007, and I might have even brought up the issue of sprinkler systems or something of that nature. They might not be mandated by code, but because the building's a butt like that, I might have said, you know, hey, listen, I think you need some sort of fire suppressant, whatever that may be. I don't know, but there would have been a completely different conversation in 2007, given the change in the application. It's a completely different application. So it's very difficult for me to imagine what I would have done in 2007. Would I have approved this if it was presented to me in 2007? I don't know that because I don't have the plans. I don't know about fire safety. I don't know about code. I don't know anything about that, about egress. What about egress and ingress? I mean, there's so many issues here. It's really hard to overcome. I mean, really hard, at least for me. So I'll let you I'll give you another shot at it. So keep going.
All right, let me run through some of the rest of these.
Please do.
I just have photographs of the inside, first floor, and then the stairway going upstairs.
Do you have photos of the apartment? I have not seen it.
That's what these are.
Okay.
It's basically, it's empty. No furniture, it's empty rooms.
Well, it wasn't for some period of time. It was occupied.
I got that. I understand that. I completely understand. I know the history is bad, but I'm here to try to address it. This picture has, you can see, this is the back of the building. It looks out over a roof with a cupola, and that's the garage that's on the property behind this. And I put this picture specifically in here specifically to show why I'm wondering why blacked out windows in the back were required as a condition when I don't think there was any functional purpose. If you,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can answer the question about the blackout windows. The immediate neighbor, Gaffney, at the time was very concerned about these changes to this building and potential problems, the effect on his property being so close, and requested that there not be visible windows even though the plan included putting these into some storage space for some unusual reason. The
Well,
request
it
was made by.
was for circulation, that was the point. The point that the applicant made at the time was for circulation purposes,
Okay. This is a couple of elevations. You'll see in the bottom one, there is a skylight here. This second level does not encompass the entire footprint of the building. There's a sort of a parapet or a faux roof line here with this apartment unit in the middle. It doesn't butt up against the bookstore next door. You can see here skylights on the left, skylights on the right. Front of the building is at the bottom. The new entrance would be separated. It would run up the same staircase, but it would have the same and then same layout, but it would comply with the fire code because these dark walls would be added with the appropriate rated material so that it would comply with the fire code. These lines show the egress paths for the commercial space, and this is all first story. Second story, you can see here this box is the apartment, and there's space where there's skylights on either side. So again, this does not extend up to book plan is over here, and the Christian Science reading room is over on the left side. The emergency egress would be out, a new egress window here, walk toward the front. There'd be another access through the bedroom here to a passage out to those two little openings in the roof to the front for emergency fire escape. Same thing on the left side, emergency egress out through a passageway out to the front. And you'd have an additional way to get there here. So you have good health and safety built into this. And these are all based on input from the fire marshal. And just to go back here, these are those new openings. These are flat panels right now. Not flat, but they're pitched, and the panels themselves don't have these openings. So these would be like little open, I guess, little, what do you call them? Little terraces, I guess, that would serve as the emergency escape area. I've included this table in my presentation, but the same discussion is in the application item K. That's basically it. It sounds like we're really hung up on the fact that there were repeated attempts to terminate a violation. I wasn't involved then. I got involved when the owner contacted me to proceed with this, and the best way I could proceed with it is to file an application and address it head on and eliminate the violations by having an approval. Whether or not this has an impact on the neighbors, I really don't see where there is. There's no additional activity other than an apartment in exchange for storage. One space overnight for parking, I can't imagine that being a negative impact on neighbors. And if you were to look at, go back and show you the front of the building. Okay. Darien Book Aid Planning, the driveway is right over here. It's just outside the picture. What's happening is users of this building are helping themselves to the few parking spaces that are in front of 1918 to the point where the applicant has had to put cones up so that people don't do that anymore. They actually have a sign in the window that says, please park on the street. On the other side,
this parking, go ahead.
Parking here. This is the only site that's got at least some on-site parking. among the three properties here. There's a driveway here, but it goes back to probably one space of private
Yeah.
parking.
I understand, but
How many spots are available right now? There's 6, right?
6. It dimensions out for 6.
Right. Okay.
Now, granted, the dimensions don't work because the building is where it is, the property boundary is where it is, but the old survey that was done, I find it now, here, and this was from 2007, lays
Right.
out dimensions for 6 spaces.
Right.
With a planter up here, so, you know, at least it's some parking. Whereas the 2 adjoining properties have no parking at all.
I'm sorry, but I just don't see the correlation between the parking and the other properties, the abutting properties. I just don't see the correlation. I'm here about the apartment, and I understand the reduction of parking and that you only need 1 spot versus 2 spots. I get that. That's not really the point here, Bob, as far as I'm concerned. The point is we got an illegal apartment up there that you're looking for us to remove the stipulation from the 2007 application or resolution, pardon me. And we're trying to figure out why we should do that with an apartment with no plans, no C of O, no inspections, no nothing. I mean, I just don't know. May I please hear from other board members, please? Mike Netter.
If I could just say one thing, what you're talking about, inspections and CO and all of that, comes after variances, and it would come after the Planning and Zoning Commission approves the special permit. And
So we do this. What are you gonna do? Open up all the walls so we can do plumbing and electrical?
whatever the building official and the fire marshal require, that's what they have to do.
Well, that's what they're gonna require. I can pretty much tell you. Oh, shush.
That's fine. We understand that, and that's what I mean, the owner knows that. That's why we've had these discussions with the fire marshal, and you know, if you approve this, we have to go to the other commission anyway. I mean, we're at the beginning here.
Okay, so can I ask, I just want to make sure I understand this from a simplicity standpoint. History aside, you are asking us to remove or amend the existing stipulation that was placed on this property to allow them to build a safe apartment, a safe 1-bedroom apartment in this zone with special permit. And for that, what you're trading is both safety, improvement in safety, and you're going to reduce 1 parking space. So you're asking us to evaluate it on those merits, right?
Yeah. Yes.
No, he's not reducing 1 parking space.
No, reducing the nonconformity by 1 parking space.
Correct.
Okay, so there will be no change in the parking spaces. They will keep whatever's there.
Correct.
Okay, so that's just semantics. Okay.
Well,
So then, Bob, if we were to approve this, you would then go through the proper steps, go through planning and zoning, submit plans, and then this would most likely appear in front of us again with plans to approve.
no, it would only be a P&Z for a special permit.
Okay.
No, it would go to Planning and Zoning Commission. It would go to ARB because they're changing the facade.
Okay.
Planning and Zoning Commission because it needs a special permit. And it would be the same approach. It's an amendment to the existing special permit and business site plan, I guess. Because you need both. It's a commercial site. So it goes through both of those. Then it has to go through plan review on a much more formal level by the fire marshal. And then finally, the building official. And how they go about their inspections and permitting and sign-offs is really up to them. But I know they're not, what's the right word? I know they're very diligent, and I don't really see any risk of either one of them ignoring health and safety issues here. You know, if
I have no confidence that the client wouldn't. The client has been dictated terms over the course of many years, and they have failed to comply. So even if we do put stipulations in place, I'd have no reason to believe they'd comply with them.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, that's my concern. So anyway, Bob, I think you did a nice job presenting this on its merits for what it is. I'm trying to see the side of it that you're presenting, but it is, I mean, this is bad. What has happened in the past, we've dodged a bullet with this. So I'm not comfortable with this application at all.
I understand that, but as I said several times, I'm here to address it, to try to get to where it can be approved with the appropriate modifications to bring it into compliance with the fire and building codes.
Yes,
From a
Yeah,
zoning
which is
standpoint,
good.
it's allowed. There's a variance already in place for the parking, and there are conditions, and the one that really is the sticking point here is the use of the second level. And
Yeah.
I don't know what the thought process was in 2007. There was no discussion about a dwelling unit upstairs.
But that's not the
irrelevant.
issue.
Yeah.
Whether there was discussion or there wasn't discussion is not the issue. The fact is we got to go by the facts. And the fact is there was no discussion, not our problem why it wasn't discussed, and it's not our problem to understand why the windows are required to be blacked out. That's not up for discussion here. What's done is done. I don't care that what discussed.
Jeff, it's not actually true though, because during the deliberations, I raised the issue of use of that space. And because of that discussion, it was decided that it would not be a used space by inhabitants. It's that there would be no office, no apartment, no conference rooms, customers wouldn't go up there, all because we were trying to reduce kind of the use of that building because of the limited parking and other things around it. So that's why the stipulation went in. If you look at the notes on page 4 of the resolutions, calendar 13, 2007, I think I was involved. My name's there. So
Yes.
that jogs my recollection. And what I need to hear from Bob is why should we change that? And I haven't heard anything other than they want to change it. In fact, they've wanted to change that stipulation for several years. That's why they ignored it.
Yes, I understand, and your point is correct, Gary, and you weren't the only one. Dick Sanford also chimed in and stipulated that this will remain storage only. So yeah, you're correct in with respect to the lack of the apartment discussion. So you're absolutely right. What was discussed was that really there wasn't going to be an apartment, but that's neither here nor there. Bill, Hessert, or Dan, do you have anything to add at this time? Do you have any? I'd like to hear some other comments from other board members.
No, I think I would like to know one more time, Bob, what is the hardship that you described? Can you reiterate again?
The hardship was already established in 2007. It's an existing building that was built with uses in place long before the zoning regulations that govern parking dimensions, building coverage, and setbacks were all adopted.
Okay.
That's the hardship. Whether
Yeah.
this second level is a dwelling or dead storage doesn't change the fact that there's a hardship. It's the same hardship.
Mhm.
And that's already been found in 2007. If I could just read something from the 2007 resolution. Number 1, this is the condition. Due to the significant limitations of the existing parking area, the entire second floor mezzanine level of the proposed structure shall be used at all times for storage purposes only, but it goes on to say no owner office, meeting, product display, or customer use of any kind shall occur in this space. It does not say no apartment. I know it's semantics, it may be technical, but the discussion here was the conversion of the building to a retail showroom with an extension of that use onto the second floor for storage.
Bob, have you been able to alleviate, other than the reg change, which really didn't give you more parking, have you been able to alleviate the substandard parking by leasing parking in other areas for customers to use? Or is what you read still a concern?
Well, there are spaces. It's a very limited use. No,
Right,
we
but
haven't, because
But they haven't
we don't
changed
have-
since we had that finding.
well, you can't, well, this is a condition.
Right, but so you haven't changed. You haven't gone and leased parking spaces from somewhere. We've had other applicants make sure that there is enough parking by leasing parking from a neighbor. None of that has happened, right?
It's pretty much impossible in that neighborhood.
Okay, and just the answer is no.
No. And the reason is it's virtually impossible.
So what we found then still exists now. It's
Yes.
substandard parking.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
it's the same substandard parking, except that it's one space less substandard. It really is.
Okay.
Compared to,
Okay. All right. Bill, would you like to add any comment here?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like
No,
to.
I'm okay. I'm okay for now. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Woody, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think we should at least note that the 2007 plans established on the second floor the storage area and essentially openings down to the lower showroom level, essentially around the perimeter. That was filled in so that effectively the storage area, the square footage of it was increased to make the apartment. So we have a somewhat larger interior circumstance in terms of usable square footage. And this plan also calls for some increase in volume with these balcony passageways projecting out of the front wall. So there are changes that occurred that increase some things, and there's new ones proposed now.
Yeah, I understand that. In addition to that, this is a completely different use than that was proposed and approved in 2007. And the hardship that was used in 2007 is why they got what they got in 2007. So now we're in a different spot with a different use. So it's a completely different situation. So look, and I would also note that the owner of the property is on this meeting or in this meeting, whatever. And if others are interested, as I sort of am, in hearing a few moments from her, I would be interested if she would like to do so. If not, it's perfectly acceptable. It's up to her. She has a representative, so it is what it is. But if she would like to add anything, that is her choice. But I'm very close to closing this hearing. Okay, I will also ask if there's any public comment. If anybody from the public would like to comment on this application, I invite you to participate.
Hello, I just wanted to say that I'm interested in remedying the situation.
Okay, if I may interrupt, just for the record, introduce yourself for the record, please.
My name is Julie Pagnosi,
Thank you.
and I'm just interested in remedying the building to comply with the current codes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bob, I'm not too sure there's really anything more to say at this point. We've gone a little long here, and I sometimes do, but I never like to speak for the board, but I have a sense of where we're going with this. So unless you have anything briefly to add that has not already been discussed, I'm happy to listen to it. Otherwise, I'm going to close.
I would just sum up by saying that, and reiterating what Julie just said, she's trying to address this so that it can be made legal. The inspections and code compliance issues that would be addressed by the fire marshal and the building official can be left to those two offices to deal with. If you approve this, it's a reduction in, again, the number of nonconformities in terms of the number of spaces. But that's it. It's a permitted use by special permit. The change is from one special permit use to another up there. We still need to go to planning and zoning. That commission will have similar concerns that you would, that you have expressed already. We'd have to deal with them. and again, would have to deal with the fire marshal and building official.
I understand what you're trying to do today, and I understand what you're trying to do today, and to some small extent, I appreciate that. However, there were several other attempts over the years, at least 3, that the applicant had the opportunity to address these issues starting back in 2013. It was never done, quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, until staff found out and staff notified the board. So, you know, this is where we are, and I understand that there is no public comment. I'll ask again, is anybody from the public like to be heard on this matter? Okay, any board members have any other questions, comments, or concerns before I close? Okay, with all that said, I am going to close this hearing, and we are going to move to deliberations. So, so board members can rotate around and enjoy the rest of their evening. Enjoy the rest of their evening, period. Okay? Okay. Whew. Gary?
I'm just looking back at as best I could recall from the deliberations 14 years ago, we were concerned about the limited, the use of the property, limited available parking. We didn't want to have any use of the upstairs because of the strained use of the property with the limited parking. I know the regs kind of view storage like floor space in a retail location, but that wasn't the point of our stipulation. Was that area would not be used for human use. So I didn't hear anything today to suggest I would have come to a different decision had they asked for an apartment 14 years ago.
Understood. Okay. Barb, I'll ask you for a comment, but maybe you don't have more, but please feel free. Barb, you got anything?
Our job is to make properties more safe and less safe. So Bob's comments resonate with me, but I don't see any clear argument for a special stipulation in this case for a 1-bedroom apartment. So
Understood. Bill, any comment? No? Okay, good. Dan, questions, comments, concerns?
No, same as what Jeff and Barb, outlined. I concur with them.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. I'm going to make a motion to deny this application then, and deny the variance. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
All in favor of denying this?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead. What did I do?
No. I'm concerned about what do we do? Excuse me. If you deny this.
Oh, you want me? Okay, Woody, you want me to stipulate all that now before I vote? You want me to stipulate that because I'm gonna have stipulation here. Gary and the board, Bill, how long okay, so what are we gonna, yeah, you're right, Woody. Okay, so what are we gonna do here? I mean,
we're not an enforcement. Jeff, we're not an enforcement in my mind. The town is either gonna choose to enforce this or not. We're denying an application.
So you don't want us to stipulate they got 120 days to rip it out?
We're denying their application.
Okay, Woody, he's got a point. He makes a point. His point is correct.
That we don't have a enforcement arm of the Zoning Board of Appeals. People come before us, they ask for variances or interpretations of regulations, and we make a decision.
Well, what you could do is you could void the 2007 approval until the project is brought into conformance with those 2007.
I don't know if we can.
Or yes, it falls into a cease and desist. And
I think the town needs to decide what to do. The town needs to decide what to do outside of this zoning board. And Bill's shaking his head. He agrees.
I'll go.
I agree too.
So the board understands what's going going to happen here is that I saw 4 no votes. So Barb, I didn't see you. You're not on screen, but
I'm a no.
okay, so that's 5-0 to deny the application, Woody, okay? And as Gary points out, we're not an enforcement, so it's up to the town and the appropriate officials to enforce the fact that there's an illegal apartment that's not been approved. Okay, and the board will leave that to you and town officials to deal with, okay?
This has to stop. This has to
stop. We agree. We've denied it, and
I don't think he was telling us it has to stop. I think he was telling the applicant, and the town needs to decide what to do.
Oh, no, I understood. Okay.
Thank you.
It's 5-0 to deny. This application is closed. We're moving on. With all that said, Bill, enjoy the rest of your evening. Mr. Netter, the chair is now yours.
Thank you very much. Bill, thank you very much for stepping in.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Really appreciate it. Okay. So with that, we took a little longer than I had hoped on that application. I did get to eat dinner though, which was nice. So marking that as a win. We're going to start with 10-2020 Westbridge Manor / Corbo. This is a very similar application to the last application. So, you know, if the applicant, I believe Mr. Corbo, you were on during the last application. So hopefully you listen to the board and its instructions and really the concerns that we have in these types of applications. Because, you know, what we don't want to be in the business of doing is approving applications that, you know, fly in the face of the zoning regulations and or previous approvals. So with that in mind, Mr. Corbo, we'll let you get started.
Don Corbo is my name. Westbridge Manor, 410 is what I call the building, Westbridge Manor. I've owned for 45 years. I want to thank Woody and Jeremy Ginsburg for kind of helping me through this process because I've never had to do this before. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know. This is an older picture of Westbridge Manor before the trees got big as they are now. So the building has roughly 17, as I counted them today, 17 dormers existing. The most important part of this hearing for me, quite frankly, right now, is this idea that I went forward or I was trying to beat the system or whatever. That's the last thing in the world I would ever do. I will tell you just briefly what did transpire with respect to this building permit. I used to live in the building. During the pandemic, I moved out of the building. Unfortunately, we had quite a few old Darien residents who didn't make it through the pandemic. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on that too much. I was away. I had gone to California to visit my grandson, who was his 4th birthday. The lumber and the building permit I was supposed to submit on Monday. I didn't get back in time, and what happened was that Dave Francis, who is the fire marshal, who lives down the street from my building, who inspects my building every year, I have never had any write-up on the 45 years I've owned this building for anything. That building is, I've got everything by code, because even though the building is non-conforming and the fire marshal, you still have to keep up with fire regulations, which obviously I do. Dave Francis is the guy that comes every year. That's actually what happened. By the time I got back, the carpenter had already started. Dave Francis called me, told me what was going on. I didn't realize. I met him. I was going to file that permit on Monday. I did go to the building department with everything filled out, ready to go. And then I was told what I was told. Okay, so, and then I had even talked to Jeremy Ginsburg, and I said, listen, if I've got to start this thing, I'll tear the dormer down, because the dormer didn't get that far into, well, one day of the carpenters working there, but he didn't think that that was necessary. So I just like to clear that part up, because that's very important to me. So with respect to this particular building, it was built by the Phillips Nickel Magnesia Company, and I can only tell you the history that I know. I'm only the third owner since the building was built. I believe it was actually built way before zoning, because the town of Darien really has no records of this building that far back. I was told that years ago, because this was the only apartment building in Darien for years and years and years. Darien never had a zone that allowed you to build an apartment building. Didn't exist. The Phillips family built it for 17 of their executives in a super's apartment. And then Mr. Phillips died. Mrs. Phillips was a member of a church in Stamford.
Mr. Corvo, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can we just focus on the variance, the hardship, what the variance you're asking for? I appreciate the history of the building, and I'm sure a lot of the board members would be interested in it, but if it's not relevant to the application, let's just.
Well, I unfortunately, I understand. But I do think it's relevant to the application from this standpoint.
Okay.
That based on what I was told in the history, that the building actually was once in the town of Stamford. That's why the building was permitted to be built. And somewhere along the line, when the town got incorporated, or Stamford and Darien decided where the lines were going to be, that all of a sudden the building ended up on the Darien side. I think that's why the building is in Darien to this day. I have a lot of deeds here from the city of Stamford, because that's where the deeds are. They're not in Darien. So it's definitely a non-conforming building. Okay, with respect to the building itself. This building was designed in such a way that all the first floor units, with the exception of the old super's apartment, which is actually on a mid-grade level. So the first floor are all one-bedroom apartments, basically, and they're all on one floor. You have access from either Holmes Avenue or West Avenue from that side of the building, and then every apartment has their own back door from the parking lot behind the building. The second floor units all are two-story, and in this dissertation of questions that I was able to get, they kept referring to the existing apartments being in the attic. Well, the way the building is constructed, that's where all these dormers are, and there are bedrooms, rather large bedrooms, in the two-bedroom apartment. So you've got a living room, dining room, kitchen on the first floor, and then a bedroom on the second floor with an interior staircase, which is the same in this particular apartment where the dormer got started. And of course, nothing has happened. And I agreed with Dave Francis that I would shut everything down once I got to the building. And that's the way it's been sitting ever since, to try to get permission to go forward with this. So a gentleman that lived in that apartment, Mr. Kulowick, who actually lived in that apartment for 60 years, he was a tenant that I inherited. He recently passed away. And on that second floor, there was a big room, unfinished room, that he used as a workshop. And it's heated and so forth. So my idea was to put a dormer in that roof line to add, there would be, and then a total of 18 dormers that would look out because in the wintertime on that side of the building, it looks over the Norotan River. And it also looks over the property adjacent to me is owned by the water company. The water company owns all the property from that side of my building, which is the Park Lane side, all the way down to the end of my parking lot. And there's this house there, never been occupied. That's the pump that pumps the water from Stanford to Darien. So in terms of a neighbor being concerned about maybe the way it looks or whatever, I'm looking back over the Norotan River, back into Stanford, because that's where the bridge is that goes over the Norotan River. I believe now that the property line between Stanford and Darien is in the middle of the Norotan River. That's what I was told. So basically, it's to add a 2-window dormer to make that apartment a little more, we'll say, attractive or whatever. And my intention was that was the apartment that I was going to move back into. I'm 77 years old and I'm about done working in my life. I just want to go back to the building, and it's a lot easier to take care of the building when you live there.
Mr. Corbo, it's Barb Hazelton. I looked at your units to rent. I really like them. I'm confused. Now, I think, how many apartments are there in total that start on the second floor and go up into the third floor space?
Well, let's see. Let me make sure I get the count right. I believe there's 8.
8. So is this apartment unique in that because this resident lived there for so long, you never finished the space for him? Because the units I've seen are all finished.
Well, I've asked over the period of years, Mr. Kulowick's wife passed away. I mean, his sons who had to come back and clean his apartment, they're in their 60s. But I offered him to move to the first floor because he was an old guy. You would think, no, he didn't want to do that. And, it's kind of unheard of that anybody would live in an apartment for 60 years, but that's him. So he didn't want me to do anything. I mean, now I went in and I painted it and cleaned it and put new appliances in it. And there is a bedroom on that. There's a staircase in that apartment, a finished staircase that goes to the second floor. And there's a bedroom up there. And then there's a door that goes into what his workshop was. And that's the room that I wanted to finish and put a dormer in and turn it into another bedroom. I mean, there's no way. I mean, it's been 18 units ever since Philip built it. The building hasn't changed one iota. It looks exactly the same other than me painting and, keeping it up and doing what I do.
But so I suspect, so we have a rule in Darien, right? And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. It's 50% of the third floor can be finished based on the second floor square footage.
That's in a single family unit.
Okay, so that's not the case in the apartment building.
Wow.
Well, that's my problem is that nothing applies to my building because it's been there forever and that's the way it was built. The other interesting thing, just from a safety standpoint, I'll just throw in there that years ago when this was built, the architect who built it, who I'm pretty sure was a pretty famous architect, he also built a church that's in Stanford that Mrs. Phillips gave the church the building to. There are firewalls that go from the basement all the way into the attic. Today in a new building, you get double 5/8 sheetrock and 2x4s, but it was pretty amazing that this guy back then, of course, Phillips, they obviously had plenty of money. They're going to build it the way they thought. It does have a poured concrete foundation, which was very unusual for back in those days. I supply heat and hot water in the building because there's a big boiler in the center of the building. The building now does run on gas as opposed to oil.
Yeah, I want to interrupt just like Mike did earlier. I just want to focus on a question. Woody, is it true that any kind of exterior work or interior changing of the living space requires a permit because it requires a variance because the entire building is non-conforming. I'm trying to find the regulation that we're trying to apply here, and the application doesn't include a regulation or a clear statement, not that I could find, of what variance is being sought.
Right,
Right.
that was gonna be my question, Gary. What, the application is blank at the top where the actual
Normally puts in that-
section that's being varied exists. So what are we asking for a variance of?
The specific is the setback for the dormer volume. The dormer that's been framed out is within the Park Lane setback.
Because the distance from the midpoint of that.
There's also a height circumstance where, because this is in a single family zone and the normal 30 feet
Right.
height applies, this exceeds that. So there's
Well, what's
two
the current height of
specific-
the building, Woody? Does this exacerbate that because of the way the calculation's done?
I'm not sure of that because this dormer looks to be a little higher than the other dormers in the building, but we don't have an actual comparison of what's the height of the existing compared to this one.
Don,
Hold on. I did hire a Frateroli surveyor. I was asked to do that, to get the height, because Woody, did a calculation just kind of, trying to put something on. But in the material that you've been given, I mean, the dormer does not exceed the height of the ridge of the existing
No, but
building.
that's not the way the math is done, but
Well, I don't know.
for height purposes. But let me go back to Barb's question. Before the construction on this was started, there was no natural light going into that room because it was an unfinished.
There is a door at the end, which is the fire escape, because that building, every second floor, or we'll call it third floor of the building, has a fire escape to get out in case of a fire. So
that was the only natural light in that area.
yeah, it had the door that's in there. I had to replace the old door because the old door rotted out. I put a new door in, and it's got a light, it's got a light in the door. That's the only light that it has right now.
Okay. Would you be willing to match the other dormer? And this one seems double the size of the other dormers. And just for the record, by the way, for almost 20 years, I lived down the block from this, and I passed the building every day. I knew people who lived there. And I knew the history of it. And I see all the dormers all around it. But this one you seem to design to be double in volume and not in keeping with all the other ones. Was that intentional?
Well, it was intentional from the standpoint that I was just trying to put two windows together to give it more light than the other windows. Because the other windows, when you look at them, that's a practical matter. They're not the biggest windows. They're small kind of windows, but they do let in air and light. When you look at the back side of the building, which let me just show you. This is that side of the building, by the way. Oh, up here. Yeah. That's a porch, which also goes from that apartment. There's an open porch that overlooks, again, the water company property, and that's the existing dormer of the existing bedroom that's right over that. And unfortunately, in this picture, and the other dormer is just on that roof, which you see in that that photograph that you have there that the architect did.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but the existing dormers are not only smaller, Gary, they're also set back. If you look, there's almost like a window well under it. They don't protrude out as much as this dormer. It's not keeping the architectural design. It's sort of bizarre.
Well, here, look at this. I mean, I've got photographs. If you look at the building, and depending on where you're looking. Now, this picture here, is the front of the building. That's the main entrance between Holmes and West. And there's a balcony there. And above that, which is, it looks like a dormer, and that's two windows into a bedroom on that second floor for that apartment.
Can I just ask a question? What is the purpose of this dormer?
What is the purpose? I'm sorry.
What is the purpose of this dormer?
The
Why do
new
you
dormer?
need this variance?
I needed the dormer to put a window in a room. It has no window now. So I can't imagine anybody using.
You could put a skylight in there and get light into the room.
Yeah, but you know, a skylight you can't open and you can't get air and you can't get sun and you get,
Sure
you
you
know.
can. There's all
Well,
those things. What do you
hold on,
is
hold on,
skylight
hold on.
conforming?
The skylight's got a lot of issues. One, to me, that skylight, to me, architecturally is worse than a dormer. I mean, I don't have a problem putting in a smaller dormer if that's what this is about. But a skylight doesn't go in this kind of a building, in my opinion. The skylight doesn't open, and then you've got heat. You know, the building, by the way, has no insulation, okay? So, you know, the walls are empty. I got stucco, and that's, in other words, the dormer, if you look in the rendering by the architect, is going to look exactly like the other dormers. I was getting windows to look just like the other windows. So first of all, who's going to see this dormer? It's just another dormer on a building, and it's facing water company property. It's not like it's going to change anybody's life other than make a better apartment in the town of Darien.
So, Mr. Corbo, what we're struggling with is that this is a cosmetic improvement and not a necessary safety or hardship. There's no.
Whoa. I differ there, because if the fire marshal was here, he would tell you that, you know, you have windows in a building so you can get out in case of a fire.
But you have egress.
You've got an egress.
There is.
Yeah, I've got a fire escape. Yes.
I understand, but this is what our board is challenged to find. We have to give a clear reason why we would approve a dormer versus a skylight. So if it's just an issue of light to the space, there are other options. So that's what we're trying to drill down on. I agree, it would look lovely to put the dormer there, and it's in keeping with the architecture, but that's not what our board does. We have to decide for reasons of safety, or, you know, egress is a hardship. What else, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some hardship related to your property that makes this necessary. And saying you want better lighting in a bedroom, you know, I have a really hard time.
Not better lighting. It's got no window, zero window. So I don't know who's going to want to sleep in a bedroom with no window. How do you open a window at night? You know, you want an air conditioner. You don't run
Talk about this in deliberations, but the hardship
You've given
is.
us testimony that there's a door.
There's a door that goes outside. You're going to leave the door open?
You can put a window in a door.
Okay.
You say the door now has a window. It brings light. Go ahead.
I just don't understand, honestly. I mean, I understand why you have this board. I understand. I mean, I'm not trying to create a hardship. All I can tell you is, you know, I'm just trying to make the building, I'm trying to make the building better. It's still going to be 18 units. It's going to add an unfinished room, and it's going to be finished room. It already has heat in it. What? I don't understand what the big deal is with the dormer.
Guys, I think the hardship is the entire building is unique and in non-conforming. And we see that all the time. So the question is, just like every other applicant wants to do something to improve the flow of a 100-year-old house or increase the size of a mudroom. I mean, we face this all the time. The question is this a minimal adjustment necessary to address a building that's the entirety is non-conforming?
Well, Gary, I'm not changing the footprint. I'm not changing the parking lot. I'm not changing anything. All I'm doing is putting a roof in an existing structure that already has a room in it, and to add 2 windows. Somewhere along the line, you would think that a guy who has devoted that building to the town of Darien, and I'm going to give myself a plug, you know, when the town calls me up and asks me, could I take tenants when they were doing the affordable housing projects, and I did, half the people that live in that building are people that have lived, more than half. 75% of those people that live in that building now are people that lived in Darien forever. And where do they go when they get divorced or they're old and they want to sell their house? Usually they come to me because I still have the biggest apartments in Darien, because years ago, they had a real restriction when you finally allowed apartments to be built. They were 800 square feet. Well, this building was built before you had that regulation. And that's why people like to live there. And it's mostly Darien residents. So I'm just asking, just to figure out a way that I could just stick a dormer in a roof. That's basically it. So it makes it look, and when it's finished, it'll look exactly like all the rest. See this, and also this apartment that has this porch, this lovely porch, which Mr. Coolwick never used. But, this is a nice place for people to go out and sit and enjoy the sun in the summertime.
Okay. Anyone else?
I have nothing more, honestly.
Okay. Anyone else from the board wish to be heard?
I was just curious, Woody, was there any objections to this from neighbors?
No, not that we received, no. But while I'm here, Mr. Chairman, let me just point out a couple things. There is a square footage issue involved here that translates potentially into more residents in the building, more bedrooms with a limited parking area, which is a little stressed at times. People do park, I think, on Holmes Avenue because the parking lot isn't fully supportive. The other thing is that there is a sister wing of this building that has the same currently unfinished space. And I guess the question would be, would this lead to that space being finished as well and having those issues?
Well,
could I address that, please? Woody, in that building, I took a count yesterday. Of the 18 units, I have 19 cars in the lot. I've got 28 parking spaces in that building.
Mr. Corbo, let me spare you. Neither the issue of the other space being finished is not in front of us, so it's not relevant. And the parking would be a site plan issue for planning and zoning. So even if you got your variance, you'd still have to go through planning and zoning for an approval for this additional space. So Woody, those two sort of lay outside of our purview. What I will say is we're tasked with a very specific job, and I think Barb, you did a great job of explaining that. We have to provide the minimum adjustment necessary to provide you with the fair use of your property. And quite honestly, I don't see that here. I think that there are conforming alternatives that that you could employ that would actually get you the light, the airflow. Skylights do open. They even make automatic ones that open for venting on their own. So I struggle with this application, but we'll leave it to the board to decide.
Could I make one more statement, please?
Sure.
Gary had mentioned what I consider making the dormer smaller. I definitely would do that because aesthetically, I think it would look better, and it would just, it would just be another dormer. Nobody's care less about that. To me, putting in a skylight to me just does not go with the building. I mean, if I got to put a skylight in, I'll just rip the dormer off and call it a day. I mean, really, it's just, to me.
That would be a separate application to this board. We can't.
I disagree. It's less than the application, so it's possible you can do it.
We don't have any plans, Gary.
Okay. Then you shouldn't have been
plans to do what?
You should have been allowed to make the application.
I can't control that. I take them as they come to me.
We'll have to do this during deliberation, Mike.
Okay. Okay. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to be heard on this application? Okay. Seeing no one, we'll go ahead and close your application. Thank you for the time this evening, Mr. Corbo.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is 11/2021. David and Jennifer Brown to allow the construction of second story and two-story addition in Revere Road. If you're here on that application, please step forward.
Hi, good evening. My name is David Brown. I'm here on this application. Let's see. And hopefully you can see me. Thank you. I want to thank the board for taking the time to hear us on our application. I know it's been a long night. You have our papers, you have the plans. I believe you've all had a chance to review them. In brief, what we're looking to do is a addition on a double frontage on this house. This hardship has been recognized twice before by the board and has been granted twice. I spent a significant amount of time, which you don't have in the papers, with Charlie Savarini several years ago, and again recently, reviewing the property, reviewing the layout, trying to find a way to use the most amount of the existing home as possible, and to have the most minimal changes made in our application. And that's what you're looking at tonight. It's reflected in there. And obviously I worked with Charlie. He did the 96, and I don't know if he did the 62, but he definitely did the 96. I've relied on him heavily to figure out the best and least intrusive usage. And those are the papers you have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jeffrey, you have any questions?
David, it's Barb Hazelton. What were the options? Hi, thank you for being so concise and organized. What options did you consider other than this that you put before us?
So the issue has to do with the driveway and the garage, which obviously is going to need a street access. There was no way to site that elsewhere on the property. We looked at, instead of extending out the back, trying to have the garage use the existing space. Problem with that is that it winds up chewing up so much of the space or having just useless space that's not a very good use of the existing, just given the size it's going to be required. You also lose a bathroom, and so in the scheme of things, it really just, it didn't create a good use of the space. And, you know, because of the unique hardship that we have with this location, there was no way to do that other than making this small addition as proposed. At least Charlie and I couldn't come up with one, so.
Yeah, and are you removing anything to reduce the use of the space?
So there's a shed that's there now, and the shed would be removed, and so that would actually reduce some of the footprint in the area.
Okay.
Woody, is that shed conforming?
I'm sorry?
I was asking Woody if the shed was conforming.
I don't know, I'd have to look. I should note, though, there's a huge increase in volume with this house, including, you know, quite a bit in setback space. It's effectively a one-story house now, and it would be larger. While I have you, I also have something that a neighbor asked to read into the record. It's a brief comment. This neighbor lives directly across the Revere Road spur, where the expanded footprint would be, and the new driveway. It just says, we are concerned that the garage would be having only 15 feet setback, and the door would be facing the road directly. 15 feet is not long enough for a driveway and safe enough for people on the road to react when the cars are coming out of the garage. Other neighbors such as 14 also has a corner lot and do have garage doors facing the road directly, but they have the proper 40-foot setback. Our proposal would be that this garage either have the full 40 setback like the others, facing the current direction. That's from neighbors at, I think it's number 19, Revere Road.
It looks like from the map, there's 16.2 feet to the edge of the property line, but there's an additional not called out amount to the actual traveled way. It almost looks like there's 20 something feet. It almost looks like there's another 40 feet.
That's correct. And that area, which I call the spur, which exists between our house and 19, works in effect as a driveway for 19 Revere. There's no other access. It dead ends, as mentioned in the papers, and that's the only usage. In terms of the side of the property, that's true for the one across the street. That may be a 40-foot setback, but I'll note there are 3 or 4 other houses on the block where everyone's gone to the side garage area. That's pretty standard here. So I think if you look at just the nature of the neighborhood, Woody's point on the volume is absolutely correct. When we moved here back in 2006, I would say more than half of the homes were single-story ranches. Now we're the last one standing. Everyone else has moved to a double second story, which you can see in the PowerPoint, I believe it's PDF actually, which was presented to show the nature of the homes in the neighborhood. Just to illustrate that point, I know that doesn't speak to hardship, but just to give you the character to address his point on the volume. And again, to the 15-foot, coming flying out of the driveway, as you noted, there is more space there than the actual setback in the town property until you actually get to the road. So I would ask you to consider that.
Woody, I'm trying to find, your comment is what I thought, but I don't think the drawings do a very good job, nor some of this cutoff application documentation on where all the volume is being added. I mean, this is, let's put it this way, it's more than a dormer.
Is all the volume just on a second story to the existing footprint?
That is, well, it's mostly correct. There's this corner here inside the area we're asking for the variance. There's also another corner which fits within our usage space where we would square that off. So those are the 2 areas that are additional footprint. And then the idea would be to add a second story over the existing footprint. So I don't have the math in terms of the percentages, but I'm just looking at this and I'm saying maybe 15% is additional footprint and the remaining 85 is going to be added on top. I may be off a little bit, but that's just a quick
footprint. So conforming footprint or non-conforming footprint?
So that would be the entire footprint of the house?
No. Are you adding?
House conforming? Yeah.
No, the entire house is not, no, of course, sorry. The entire house is not conforming. The entire house has been, had variances granted twice, once in 62 and once in 96. Both variances were granted inside the non-conforming area.
Yeah, so it looks like new volume non-conforming is towards the spur. If you look at the survey map, you can see the setback line runs right through the main residence. So there's going to be a second story non-conforming on the spur side. There's going to be a proposed 2-story addition which abuts the driveway, I believe, and Mr. Brown, correct me if I'm wrong. And then there's going to be a conforming 2-story addition at the rear of the property away from the spur.
That is correct.
Does that make sense, Gary?
No, I mean, I can't really tell from this drawing, but it seems, as what he said, there's a significant amount of volume added in a non-conforming location. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's correct. It's. Let me see if I can do this.
If I'm looking at the 1996 application document that Woody had, it's really everything to the right of the side yard, 40-yard marker that Woody drew in.
Yes, correct.
Are you guys looking at the yellow highlights? Are you looking at the yellow highlighted section? Is that what you're talking about, Gary?
Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like there's a major chunk of this is already in a non-conforming zone. So we're talking about increasing.
But only 1 story.
Right, exactly. But now we're talking about stacking a second story on that in a non-conforming.
We've never felt, I mean, even just going above a screened-in porch, we've never said you have, as of right, you are adding more volume in a setback.
Yes. Well, and what is, and David, do you happen to know the total coverage? I assume it's less than 20%?
It's less than 20, it's close, but it's less.
But we're not adding coverage, you're just adding volume in the setback.
I'm just making sure that that's what we're talking about.
What's the why is all that volume necessary in the setback? Why is that the minimal adjustment necessary? Assuming that the house is non-conforming,
I'm sorry, I didn't follow your question, please.
you need to demonstrate that even if we acknowledge that there's a hardship with the property because the house is built in a non-conforming location, you need to demonstrate that your proposal is the minimal adjustment necessary to address that particular issue. You've been in the house for how many years? A denial of this variance application does not deny you fair use of that property, but so you need to demonstrate why this particular plan, especially in the setback area, is the minimal adjustment necessary to address the hardship.
So following up to a comment you made a moment ago, you're distinguishing between a one-story addition and a 2 or more story addition in that area? Is that your?
No,
is that...
what I'm saying is just because in the 17 years that I've been on this board, we've never just allowed someone to go up an existing non-conforming location just as of right, because you're adding more volume in the setback. So you still have to demonstrate, meet the standards in order to do that.
Yeah, for example, David, you could make it like a 1.5 story home. Like you could go over the conforming area with a 2nd story, but not over the entire footprint. You know, those kind of options. That's what we're saying.
So what I need to know is why is this the minimum adjustment necessary? What's your square footage now? And I was trying to find that. I don't think I could. What's your square footage of the house now, and what's the square footage of the house proposed?
Let's see if I have that. Hang on. I don't have the total. It's an interesting question you're presenting. I probably don't know the exact answer. I could certainly go back to Charlie and hold this over if you would like to. But in our discussions, that was certainly never brought up as an issue.
I think the issue is you need to, this is a significant, you've heard discussions tonight, right? This is a significant to the use of a property that you've had for a while, and we recognize that it's been non-conforming, but you're looking to make a change to non-conforming, making it significantly more non-conforming.
By the way, it's 2,400 square feet, 2,358. So you're talking about doubling that. That's the number.
And how much of it is, that's great, Bart, thank you, but how much of it is in the setback?
35%, according to the calculation I'm reading.
Nice, Jeff.
I guess I would recommend doing the same thing that it seems like yesterday we recommended to an applicant. Think about how this could be less burdensome to the regulations.
Right. I guess the only question that I see just looking at the footprint, and obviously I'm going to ask that we hold this over and give me a chance to speak to Charlie and see what we can do. But basically you wind up not being able to use a very large portion of the house. And I guess I'd have to construct something going to some other portion of the property, which basically means I'm throwing all that away, which seems like an obvious burden to me as the homeowner having to do that. But I could certainly, have that discussion and have a better informed answer.
Right, and I think, because I think that's what Mike, I think, was getting at with the first applicant, is show us these other options so that we can better judge the one you're proposing. Is that a fair summary, Mike, of what you were leading the first application?
Yeah, your lawyer's showing a little bit, but
yeah,
yes.
I didn't mean to lead the witness.
Yeah, I understand Gary's point. And honestly, going over an existing nonconformity is something that, we've looked at and approved in the past. What's more troubling to me is the proposed 2-story addition that adds additional structure in that space. Again, we've had this conversation a bunch tonight, and it's probably getting repetitive and old for some people, but we're trying to reduce nonconformities, not create new nonconformities. Now, there's something unique about this spur of Revere Road and how it was supposed to connect to Libby Lane, but never did. So, if there's a discussion to be had around that, or if there's a way to sort of cure some of that, fixing Revere Road fixes a lot of the problems that you're facing for variances. And it's sort of a silly dead end. And the neighbor's comment about the 16 feet, I mean, how many cars travel that spur of Revere Road? It's got to be like 4 cars a day.
I think you're a little high. I think it's, I think it's 1 or 2, and it's just the neighbors there. I mean, I can attest that the neighbors I've spoken to think it's great because it fits in with everything else in the neighborhood. So that would be the only comment I've had, and I'd be happy to try and get more support if that would be, helpful. The other point is that you mentioned is the spur is unique. I know the town has had trouble for a number of years with plowing it, trying to do the upkeep. I don't know if it's because of the easement that runs through there for the sewer is why the town doesn't want to give it away, or it's just a general town policy of not wanting to grant private roads. Personally, for me, that would be great to have an opportunity to purchase that and make this problem go away. But that's just not what the town's doing these days and has not done for a number of years. But I agree, that would be a great solution, just not available right now.
It'd be a home run, and a sewer easement, you could run a sewer easement anywhere. I mean, that seems silly to hold up a 50-foot right of way for a sewer easement. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, Gary, to your point, I think, this is what we struggle with tonight is we need to know dimensionally what we're talking about. And the plans look great and the application looks great, but if you can give us percentages, square footages, dimensions and volumes, that really makes our job easier.
And the other considerations.
Correct. And what other options you looked at to try and make this more conforming. I'd like to know if that shed that you're removing is non-conforming, because a reduction in non-conformity is a thing we look for. And, similar to the earlier application where I asked them about their stairwell. Removing that stairwell is a reduction of a non-conformity. That's great. We like to see that. So if you're doing stuff like that, we just need to understand it. With that, in your comment that you'd like to continue this and sort of take a look at getting some more data, unless there's some public that wishes to be heard, I'll go ahead and continue. Seeing no one, Mr. Brown will continue to our next hearing, which is when, Woody?
Thank you so much. Good night.
Have a great night.
September 22.
Great, thank you. Hang on 1 second. Let me just get this side. Okay, what was that? Oh, goodness gracious. Okay.
Waiting for everyone else to withdraw their applications based on our night so far.
Yeah, so calendar number 12, 2021, the application of Wilder Gleason on behalf of the Zevnik, and I apologize if I didn't pronounce that correctly, 102 5 Mile River Road. In Wilder, for us, this is a late night, so if you could try and keep it brief. And there's a question here of the ZEO's interpretation of this 90 versus 25. And I want to know if you really want us to opine on that or not, because I think we'd be more inclined to grant you a variance if you had a 90-foot setback than if you had a 25-foot setback. So just take that into your rationale for the evening.
I considered that. And I do think that the historical 90-foot setback is absolutely incorrect. And that if it's a 25-foot setback, it takes the house, which doesn't fit within any portion of the current buildable area, and makes over half of it legally conforming. So I substantially reduce legal nonconformities with a reversal of the with a 25-foot setback on the east side, and that I think that then gives you the ability to grant the variances that we're seeking for the portions that don't meet setbacks, particularly because we have unanimous support of all neighbors who have looked at these plans and encouraged us to move forward. So I don't know how you want to handle it. Dave Keating wrote a memo that basically said historically it's been a 90-foot setback, which is correct. There are two variances, one in, I think, 1984 and one in 1999 that applied a 90-foot setback. I researched this extensively, and I believe that determination is in error, and I presented evidence as to why that is the case.
So would you be open to, I mean, the reason I said what I said is because if you enforce the 90-foot setback, there's no conforming location for you to build this addition.
Correct.
Which makes our ability to approve a variance, I suppose, I don't speak for the board, much easier because there is no other conforming location where you can build this. However, once you get your 90-foot setback, you can build, you gain a very large buildable area that's conforming. And I don't know if you saw Woody's little,
I did see his thing.
his artwork, but it really glaringly points out, you know, what I'm saying to you. So I mean, the 90-foot setback may be a blessing to your clients.
Let me take a moment, if I can, and confer with my clients. Dan, could I just talk to you offline briefly?
If you want to go off camera, that's fine as well. I mean, Gary, Dan, Jeff, do you have any comment?
Is the 90-foot setback for a flag lot, is that, or the extra 50-foot?
Yes.
Is that a regulation for all flag lots?
Only if it was created after the 60s.
Right, correct.
So can you be specific with that? Where is the reg in here?
Yeah, it is. It's in Woody's markup.
Yeah.
And it basically says, for any such lot created subsequent to March 4th, 1960, the frontage of which lot is less than the minimum width required for said lot specified in the regulations, the following additional requirements shall be complied with. And then it goes into.
Is this Dave Keating's? Is there a page number to that one?
I don't.
34-page document.
It's hey, Gary, it's the third page in the packet.
Attached to Woody's questions.
Yeah, it's
Attached
highlighted in
to-
red.
Attached to the rendering, Gary, attached to this document.
Oh, one that copied really badly and impossible to read.
It's
Yes,
pretty light.
that was the one.
All right, Nate.
Mike, I think that's a creative way to look at this. You're right. The 90,
But do we have that? But how do we have that choice?
well, Dave is already, because David Keating's already,
Dave said it's 90 feet. He can withdraw his appeal of Dave's opinion.
I've spoken with my client.
Right. But I don't know how we find otherwise. When was this lot created?
I looked through Wilder's pretty diligent Wilder, title search, and I sort of agree with Dave in the first place. I mean, it's not clear when this particular 3rd-acre parcel was created. I mean, it was one of these handshake deals and family members, and a kid came home from war or college or whatever, and they just kept chopping off pieces of property to give to the family.
So when was the house built?
1907.
So this particular house was built in 1907.
Correct.
But it was on like a 5-acre parcel at that time.
Yeah,
Right,
it was
so
on a bigger parcel.
When was this parcel created? Wilder, are you arguing that because the house is built then, that the parcel was created prior to 1960?
I believe it was, but I'm happy to withdraw my appeal of Dave's opinion, determination, and rely on the fact that with that determination, no portion of the residence is located in the buildable area. and it has never been within the buildable area since that regulation was adopted.
Right. So then with the totally non-conforming house, while you still don't have free reign, that's the hardship, and you need to demonstrate minimal adjustment necessary. You agree with that, right?
Yeah, and that.
You might want to think carefully about this.
Right.
It's like kind of a loaded gun here.
You know what? I'm just going to go with my initial. I actually think that Dave's memo is incorrect, and that we have, I will acknowledge that this is not the cleanest of applications, but I believe it's a good application, and it's fully supported by all the neighbors. Okay, we have written testimony. Every neighbor is saying, please make it happen. We love your plans.
Yeah, but you know that's not what governs.
I absolutely understand that. So let me go through the presentation. If Fred, can you allow me to share my screen?
Just a moment, Wilder.
Can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So I represent Daniel and Lindsay Zavnik, who bought 102 5 Mile River Road in 2017. And I'm here to ask you to overrule a determination the ZEO made regarding the 90-foot setback. And I'm also asking for variances to allow construction of a screen porch, a 4th bedroom, and a garage expansion that would be 11.8 feet from the north property line, where 25 is required. And depending on your determination on our appeal of Dave's opinion about setbacks, if you agree it's a 90-foot setback, we would need a 50.2-foot setback from the east property line in lieu of 90 feet. So I open with the assessor card, and you can see that I've highlighted the year it was built, 1907. The square footage is 2920. The acreage is 0.367, and it's a 3-bedroom house. This is the survey that shows the current setbacks and the property. And the property has a driveway by easement over the Manelli property immediately to the south. And you can see that driveway goes out to 5 Mile River Road. And the property is in 2 zones. 300 feet from 5 Mile River Road is the edge of the 1/2 acre zone. And if you look in the back of the property, there's a dashed line that says zone line on this. The property that's closer to 5 Mile River is in the R1/2 zone, and the property that's further from 5 Mile River Road is in the R1 zone. Now, there is no frontage on a street. The lot was created, we are convinced, by 1942, and its access was only by easement over the driveway. That is shared with the Manellis, so they use the same driveway.
Yes. When was the easement documented? When was this?
1927.
When?
1927.
Okay. So that's the gist. That property was 1960.
All of this property was owned by one family, including the Manelli property, and the family conveyed the southern portion here, what is now Manelli, and I believe some additional property, which may have been the Roaches, to somebody, but reserved the driveway easement in 1927.
So going to Dave Keating's, was he knowledgeable of these dates when he determined?
No, he didn't have all the background that I provided to you.
Okay, so he did not know whether the property was created before or after 1960.
Correct.
And the evidence you're presenting tonight is suggestive of the property being created before 1960.
I believe it's conclusive.
Okay, thanks. Keep going, thank you.
Okay, coverage is 13.47 percent. This setback shows this survey shows the 90-foot setback from the east property line, and you see that the buildable area, no portion of the residence is located in the buildable area. There are 2 prior variance approvals which we submitted with the application, calendar 50, 1984, and calendar 7, 1999. Each of those referenced a 90-foot setback. I don't think anyone did the research that we did to determine that it really doesn't apply. So let me take you through some pictures about the residence. This is the driveway from our house, which is on the left, where the Belgian block on the left, and then there's a crest of a hill, and then it goes down to 5 Mile River Road. To the right is the Manelli residence. Turning from that same spot of the shared driveway, you see the Zevnik residence in the front on the south side. And then I'm going to go down, and here's the rear of the Zevnik house. Now, the addition we're proposing is over the rear wing, which has a garage underneath and a kitchen above. And what we're proposing is a 4th bedroom above this existing wing. And we are also proposing a screen porch out the back that would come about where the front of this car is. And a slight addition to the garage to accommodate equipment. So that's where it's this basically 2-story addition. We'd add a 3rd story above and have a slight screen porch addition that would be at the level of the kitchen.
And Wilder, if we disagree with Dave and a lesser setback is required, where is the setback line on that portion of the house?
It would be behind the garage, behind the car, I believe. Let me go back. Yeah, it would be very close to, I guess, close to where the car is.
So I'm sorry, is everything you just described would be conforming or non-conforming?
Portions of it that are on the north side would be non-conforming, and a portion of the screen porch on the north side would be non-conforming. I have plans highlighted that show that, if you wish.
Okay, so and your plans differ from what Woody circulated because he was assuming the 90-foot setback?
Yes.
Okay.
So the second picture, the Zevnik Drive, and you'll see the Levine house here. It's basically the Levine house is to the rear of their property, and it's not near where we're proposing our 2nd-story addition and the screen porch. You can see in front of the, in the first picture on the left here, you can see the fence posts that you see more clearly in the second picture. Okay, and you can see the Levine house is essentially behind the fence post, which is part of the garden. Okay. This is a picture of the Manelli residence, which is south of our property. The shared driveway is in the middle there, going up to the crest of the hill that leads down to 5 Mile River. And this is the second picture, is a picture of the Manelli and Roach fence. The Manellis own a bunch of this property, and some of the fence is on the property line of what would be the Roaches. This is the Zevnik backyard. Again, you can see the Levine house and the fence post for the garden that we talked about. And the Zevnik house on the west side, this is where the addition is largely proposed. It'll be a second, basically a 2nd story or 3rd story above what we have here. We have a garage below, and there would be an extension of a screen porch towards the car. Okay. The setback here is 25 feet, and we're about 13 feet from the property line on the left corner of the garage. So the setback line would go probably just to the right of the left window of the kitchen. You see that? So maybe a little bit further, maybe to the center line of between the two garage doors, okay? Now, this is Seymour's survey showing a 25-foot setback. And as you can see, most of the house now moves into the buildable area. Over half of it, I believe, or about half. The addition that we're proposing, you'll see the single crosshatch that is the proposed second floor addition. And that is located 11.8 feet from the Levine property line. And that's the portion that is closest to 5 Mile River. It gets further away as you go away from 5 Mile River because the line doesn't, the house is not square to the line on the north property line. The double crosshatched area is the screen porch and garage addition. And over half of that is located in the revised setback. A portion of it is not, as you can see. So we have two claims that the Zevnik lot does not require a 90-foot setback, because a 90-foot setback applies if you have a rear lot. And the Zevnik lot is not a rear lot under DZR section 210, because a lot that's rear has access to the street via a strip of land that is part of the rear lot. We don't have that strip of land. So we don't meet the definition of a rear lot. The other claim is section 339 of the regulation, which applies to lots with frontage less than the minimum width specified. Because our lot was created in 1927, I believe, and we know it existed, as you'll see, in 1942, the frontage requirement didn't apply until the zoning regulations were modified in 1957. So 339 applies to lots that don't have frontage on a street, and it restricts rear lots to the R1 and R2 zones. And the preamble to section 339E through G provides for any lot created after March 4, 1960, the frontage, which is less than the minimum width required, 339F says we have to add 50 feet to the setback, which is where you get the 90 feet. In the R1 half zone, a 40-foot setback is required. You add 50 feet, it becomes 90, okay? So the issue for us is we're not a rear lot, so we don't think that works because we don't have a strip of land that is part of our rear lot that provides access to the street. Our access is by means of an easement over the neighbor's property. The second is our lot existed prior to March 4, 1960. And therefore, 339F, which imposes the extra 50 feet in a front yard setback, does not apply. So we submitted a letter from William Seymour, or Jeff McDougall of William W. Seymour, and he indicated that in their opinion, the property at 103 5 Mile River Road has existed in its current configuration prior to March 4, 1960. And based on their research and mapping of other properties in the area, we feel it has retained its current configuration since at least the 1940s or earlier. So I then submitted a chain of title with all the exhibits. And in looking at that, I realized I had missed a deed because I submitted 8 deeds and there's really 9. The first deed is from Lucy, and number 9 is from Lucy Williamson to Alfred and Ruth Street. And then what happened is in 1962, Alfred Street conveyed his interest in the Zevnik property to his wife Ruth. And he did that in a deed that was recorded moments before he acquired what is now the Manelli property, which is immediately south. And I submitted a chain of title for the Manelli property as well. It's part of the record, but the streets never owned two adjacent parcels. Ruth owned what is the Zevnik property, and Alfred Street owned what is the Manelli property. Because it wasn't in common ownership, we couldn't add it. And under Section 385A, you can't add, we didn't own sufficient property, and none of our predecessors owned abutting properties, okay? So what I've done is I've taken the Zevnik deed and highlighted the property description. And then I go back to the deed from Lucy Williamson to Alfred and Ruth Street, which was 1942, and the description is exactly the same. And I've attached, as part of the record, copies of every deed in this chain of title and the description of the first tract, because the Zevniks also own a little strip across 5 Mile River that fronts on the river. So they could wharf out and put a dock there. But so there's two tracts, and the first tract has always, since 1942, been described in the same manner. And so I'm turning now to the Zevnik deed, and this is recorded in volume 1625 at page 640. And the first tract is northerly 176 more or less, and easterly 90 feet more or less, and southerly 170 feet, and westerly 99 feet. So now I go to the Williamson to Street deed, which is 1942, and northerly it's 176 feet more or less, and easterly it's 90 feet more or less, and southerly it's 170 feet more or less, and westerly it's 90 feet more or less. And that description of the first tract, which is the Zevnik house lot, has been the same for every deed since number 8. So 7, the quitclaim from Alfred to Ruth, has the same description for the Zevnik house lot, and the same with 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and to the Zevnik lot. So we have both the Seymour opinion plus the chain of title with all of the deeds showing the same description for the property. So it's existed since 1942. Now, with that, under our argument for Section 339F does not apply because it was created prior to March 1960. And I believe the record reflects that. So turning to the proposed additions. So this is the proposed additions, the south side and plans. So if you look at the bottom, that's the south.
Wilder, hang on one second. Dave Keating, you're on this as well. Before we get to the actual proposed additions, Dave, do you have any response to that inference? And I want to ask Wilder a quick question first, though. Wilder, I look at the map. The current map, so the most recent map, doesn't have any of those dimensions on it. It doesn't appear.
Right. And I for the life of me, I don't know why the lawyers involved in all these transactions didn't reference a map, because there is a map from 1962 that shows the property in the same configuration that we see now. And I can, that has been submitted. This is the map where the Manelli property was conveyed to Alfred Street. I'm now in map 4217. I'm sorry, it's a 1984 map where Christopher Little, and these dimensions here are exactly what we see on the Seymour survey. And that stands to reason because this survey was done by William W. Seymour in 1984. And that was the first variance Christopher Little got in 1984 for additions to the house. And they used the 90-foot setback in that one.
But that doesn't match up to the property description that you showed us in the deeds.
That's right. The deeds are not consistent with the survey. But
So is it
the
possible?
conveyance has been the same, and it's the same configuration according to Seymour since 1942. You really read this, Michael. I'm impressed.
Yeah, it's an interesting issue, and I just don't. Let's hear from Dave.
And if you look at it, it's closer to 200.
Yeah. All right. Let's hear from Dave and see if this has changed his opinion at all.
Dave Keating, you with us?
His mic came on.
Yeah, I see it. Now I see something on my screen. I see blue on my screen.
Skies of blue. You red roses too?
Yeah, you got that right. Whose cursor is this?
I think it's Keating.
Yeah, I would agree. I would think so.
It's Wilder's screen that we say.
Oh, it's Wilder's screen?
I took it off.
Woody, do you have Dave's cell?
He might be eating dinner. It's 10 o'clock.
Well, Dave, I mean, he's there. His mic is on.
Yep.
Yeah, I see that. And he's been on mute all night.
What are the odds he's sitting there having an entire conversation and we can't hear any of it?
I hope he's not doing that. I hate when that happens. Whew.
This is a rough evening.
We're only halfway done, man.
We can't hear you for some reason. Do you know why?
5-minute break after this one, Chair. Oof.
Yeah.
Okay, Fred, what Dave's saying is he can't seem to get his, I guess, microphone going.
You can call in.
Is there a volume setting that he might be able to adjust? Dave, can you hear us on the go-to meeting? Yeah. Right.
You know what, Jeff,
Okay.
why don't we take a 5-minute break now while we figured out Dave's issue?
I'm totally good with that, Mike. I didn't know that we could sort of pause this application, but if that's allowed, I'm totally down with that. It's 10 o'clock.
Fred, speak out loud. Advise you what to do.
Let's do that.
Okay,
Wilder and the Zevniks, I apologize, but you know, I'd rather spend this time getting the issue resolved and then, you know, not taking a break in 5 more minutes and, you know, wasting everyone's time.
I like that. Thank you very much, Chairman. I think that's a good idea.
All right, Mr. Zevnik, I assume that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Mr.
Woody,
Yep.
Channel 79,
Fred,
we're going to resume at
Fred,
10:07.
Dave said that he can hear you, Fred. Perhaps you have a suggestion of what he could look for?
I'll leave it to you, gentlemen.
I'll give him a call real quick and give him the phone number to call in on.
Okay. Did you hear that? Fred's gonna call you, Dave, and I guess suggest something to call in.
Dave should be dialing in shortly.
Dave, you got to mute one of your devices. Barb's back. Dave, I think we've got on a call. We're waiting on Jeff, Dan, and Gary. There's Dan.
I'm good.
All right, Jeff's back. Gary?
We still don't have Dave here.
Fred, is Dave on the line?
No, I don't believe he is. I believe he's caller 2, but he's muted and I can't take him off mute from the phone. So Dave needs to hang up and call in again.
That caller number 2 on my screen is labeled CO.
Yeah, it's just caller 0.
Oh, caller 0.
Woody, can you call Dave? I apologize to the applicants and the people who are waiting around to present. We're usually.
Well, yes, I could call Dave, but probably more effective for Fred to call him. And Fred does
Or
have.
Fred, okay.
He should be calling in any moment.
All right, we got our team back. Barb, you're still there, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I still can't get my camera to work. I've restarted this a bunch of times. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Seems to be the par for the course tonight. Fred, did you give Dave a call?
Yes, I did. He's calling in.
So Wilder, while we're waiting on this, do you want to start walking us through the additions? Because this seems like it's taking longer than it should.
Okay, let me, can I share my screen again, Fred?
Just a moment, Wilder. You have the screen, Wilder.
Okay. Let me try again. Oh, I've got to get the, okay, just a sec. Okay, this is the 1984 map. Does everyone see this?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So the additions, I gotta move. Okay, so the additions are, the yellow is over existing footprint. So this is the 4th bedroom over the kitchen onto the slight to the right. And then the roof line above it is colored in yellow. Okay. And then we have a slight expansion of the garage below, which is new volume and new footprint. Okay. So the solid green is new volume and new footprint. And then you have, that's the screen porch, the garage expansion, then a screen porch. Okay. So in plan, when you look at the south side, you'll see that there's an existing roof line that's crosshatched in red. And then in yellow is the new addition or the bedroom addition. And the solid green to the rear is the garage expansion and the screen porch expansion. Okay? And we're talking about, let's see, the 4th bedroom, bath, and closet will be about 490 square feet. That's the yellow that you see. And then the screen porch is 246 feet. Okay. So turning to the north elevation, you can see, looking from what would be the Levine's property, this is what the red cross hatched is the existing structure. We're adding volume yellow, and we're adding footprint and volume in the green to the rear. And then looking from the west side, which is the back of the property, looking back towards that addition, you can see the crosshatched yellow, red is the existing roof line, and the yellow would be the new addition over the existing footprint, and the green is coming towards you, towards the rear. That's the deck.
While they're using that, where your pointer, the left half is in the setback,
this
and the right half of that is
it
not.
From here over encroaches.
Say that again. Everything from the peak.
Yeah, it actually, it gets closer as we go towards the front. This is about 13 feet away in the at the edge of the existing.
Right. I understand that the line isn't.
Yeah, and we're at 11.8, I believe, right here where closest.
Look, you've obviously been here a lot. One, like, why do we need these structures? And two, have you looked at conforming locations on this property?
Well, I can't say that the architect looked at conforming locations because this was what they were working from when they started. And so
this is my sort of point in the beginning, Wilder. Do we want to take this in 2 phases? Do we want to make a determination on the 90-foot setback, and then, sort of look at what your options are for conforming construction with that revised setback or not revised setback?
I'm happy to do it, bifurcate this so that you make a decision on the 90 versus 25.
Okay, so why don't do we have Dave Keating? Is he available at this point?
This is Dave Keating. Can you hear me now?
We have you, Dave Keating. Great. So Dave, did you hear Wilder's testimony and see his info?
Yes, I heard everything for the past 2 hours, and including Wilder's presentation about the history of the property and so forth. You have the materials that he had submitted to me in June, including my June 21st letter that basically says, the numbers aren't matching up here, and the Board of Appeals has already granted 2 variances of this 90-foot setback, and it's not for me as the staff to overrule the board, so I am not going to disregard the board's decisions in the past, and so I'm going to stick with the 90-foot setback requirement. If the board hears new information and wants to change the setback requirement, or based on the new information you make a different determination, that's fine with me. I have no objection to that.
Okay, so let me ask you a different question. Did any of the testimony tonight change your opinion as to whether this was 90 foot or 25 foot?
I think the parcel was created in its current condition, was created prior to 1960. So if it wasn't for those 2 previous ZBA decisions, I would say it does not have a 90-foot setback requirement. But I am not going to overrule the board in its previous decisions, and I'm not going to disregard those decisions. So I'd stick with the 90-foot as the zoning enforcement officer and let the board decide what it wants to decide based on the new information.
But Mike and Woody, I didn't get the sense that the board in those prior decisions looked at this type of, they just assumed there's a 90-foot setback. Is that fair?
You're correct. I think they were shown a map that showed a 90-foot setback. They were asked for a variance to put additions on the house. They said, yeah, it's a funny rear lot that was created whenever it was, and it's got that 90-foot setback because it's a rear lot, and let's consider a variance application. That would have been in the previous two requests back in the 80s and 90s.
Right. So Dave, they didn't, the prior boards didn't affirmatively decide that given the history of this lot, a 90-foot setback was required.
Correct. I looked through those two ZBA files. There was no research submitted. There was no chain of title submitted. There was no argument back and forth. How should we determine this or not? It was shown on the map as 90 foot. Should we grant a variance of that?
So
as opposed to the detailed information submitted now.
Right. So I would argue we're not, nor are we asking you to overrule that decision. I understand to overrule that kind of the application of the 90-foot setback. And I appreciate your review, your opinion now, given the evidence that was submitted, that you believe it was created before 1960. I think that's a valuable piece of information for us to hear from you.
Right. Okay.
Agreed. So Dave, based on the testimony, based on all the evidence, you do believe that this was created before 1960, and do you agree that the provisions of whatever that section are only apply prior to 1960? I mean, it's clear, plain language in the reg, but I just want to make sure we have that on the record.
Right. It's section 339, note F, would apply if it was created after 1960, but this parcel in this configuration, albeit slight differences in the dimensions of the verbal description versus the survey maps, was created, I believe, prior to 1960.
And I would argue that some of that verbiage did call out approximations of distances, not specific distances. So that could be a reason why the dimensions are slightly different.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Wilder, do you have any questions for Dave, or do any of the board members have questions for Dave? Wilder, you're on mute.
I have no questions for Dave.
Okay. Dan or Barb?
No, we're just talking about the 90-foot setback at this point, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay, I have no questions about that.
No question from me also, Mike.
Okay, so this is now interesting, Wilder, because we now come to a point where I can't tell you how we're going to rule, but it seems by overwhelming amounts of evidence that this is not a 90-foot setback. And so that's going to lead into Gary's line of questioning, which is, did you explore conforming locations based on the 90-foot setback? So would you like to close the application as far as, and Gary, correct me on procedure if I'm wrong, but do you want to close the application on the issue of the 90-foot setback and take leave to address the other issues?
I'm happy to do so.
Gary, do you see any flaw with my logic there?
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, we're assuming that the board's going to vote to.
It's going to vote on the 90-foot setback, right?
Going to vote. It's going to right. So you're suggesting that we close on that and he come back later, or do we deliberate live, real time, and vote?
I think he would have to come back later because we're going to want him to look at their alternatives at that point.
And present that for our, yes, I agree.
Woody, any issue with that procedurally?
My clients are under a time gun. And we would really like to close the hearing tonight and present everything that we can. And then have you guys make a decision on the basis of what's presented tonight,
Including your plans,
including our plans.
but that's not going to go well for you.
Yeah, Wilder, without showing alternatives that explored the revised setback, it's going to be really hard for us to make a
All right,
determination.
well, let me take a moment and speak with my client, if I could.
Absolutely.
By the way, I don't mean to prejudge the deliberations, but it might not be.
Gary, I appreciate the heads up, okay?
Yep.
But let me just take a moment.
Yep. Woody, while we're on a pause, do you want to think about that? Is there anything we need to deliberate on that, or any issues?
I don't know if we can close. I don't know if we can close part and keep part open. Is that?
No,
I don't think you can do that.
I don't think you want to split it up like that. No.
Right.
But we just need the applicant's extension approval, basically, to carry on till September.
Didn't we have a second meeting this month?
We do, if you want to utilize it next week.
I think we're going to have to utilize it.
I feel like there's a lot here that I don't know what everyone's schedule's like, but
not for me.
Gary's out. Okay.
I'm okay.
What's the date next Wednesday? Well, I can figure it out. 14th, that's the 21st.
22nd.
Why are you laughing at me, man?
It's next week still has 70.
What? Well, what am I?
Well, let me point out, we've already told 2 applicants to return September 22nd.
Yeah.
Is that
You can undo,
modified?
you can undo that if they can get their information to us prior.
I don't know, they're gonna have to prepare alternative plans and convince you that theirs is the minimum adjustment, and then we have to distribute them to you guys, which should be tomorrow for next week.
Right. No. But they might have the chance to do that. Not that they actually could.
Give them the opportunity. I mean, like the Silsby application, and I don't want to get into deliberations or anything like that, but the Silsby application, like, they just need to do a couple calculations and present us with some numbers. Like, if they wanted to come back next week, I don't know. I just, I like to have a positive outcome for people who come in front of us, and it seems like tonight's been pretty negative.
I'll come back next week.
Mr. Tibbetts, would you like to continue your hearing until next week?
You want to come back next week because you know I'm not here.
I love you, Gary. Come on.
That's a total lie.
What do you mean? That's bullshit.
We'd have to call your hearing and continue it. Would you like us to do that?
Sure. Everybody should go to bed.
Okay, so Wilder's not on nor is his client.
Well, we still have the Joneses, and I don't see Mr. or Mrs. Jones on here.
Wilder's hopping
Hi,
on.
guys. I think we want to go ahead, and I'll tell you why. Let me just open my screen, share my webcam. The septic system, this house is on a septic system, and the septic system is located in that area south of the existing garage kitchen wing. And we cannot go closer to it. It's at the limits in terms of, you have to have a minimum setback from your foundation, which is why the architect decided to push out to the back for the screen porch. Because the option of going south, even with the revised setback that we have, if you agree it's 25 feet, that buildable area is not buildable. And in addition,
is the septic rated for another bedroom?
It's
Yes.
we're okay with that,
Yes,
and
it
Doug
is.
Bethesda has approved that and confirmed that the town health department will allow another bedroom, because our backup is we'd have to drill through 300 feet of 250 feet of ledge rock and connect to the sewer in 5 Mile River Road if the septic system failed. So we can add a bedroom under the health code because we have a backup system, but that backup is not one we want to implement under any.
So Wilder, you still face all the issues that every other applicant faces. Why do you need the porch? Why do you need the fourth bed? You know, all this stuff is significant extra volume in the setback, as well as, unlike some other applications we heard tonight, additional footprint in the setback.
Yes, we have additional footprint and additional setback, additional volume in the setback.
And case law suggests that the desire of an applicant to expand their home is not enough.
That's true, but the and you could take that position and say you'll never grant a variance under this.
Absolutely right. You know that we don't do that.
The result is that you never grant a variance. And the issue here is this is a house that was existed before. It's been in this location since 1907. The regs have been upgraded since then. The architect designed this with the septic system in mind. It's to build solely within the setbacks means you cut off half of that bedroom. That would be ridiculous. It just is. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, but that's not the standard. The standard is, why do you need the bedroom? Why do you need the screened-in porch? Why do you need the larger garage? Why do you need these things? And by not having them, do you lose the enjoyment of that property? Obviously not. It's been around for 100 years.
There is a reduction in conformity by moving the garage, the buildable area, so that more than half of the house is now conforming. I think that gives you the ability to approve the additional volume and footprint that we're proposing.
Can you say that again?
Making something that is totally non-conforming far more conforming than exists.
Wait, can you say that again? What does that?
The change in the setback from 90 feet to 25 feet moves most of the house into conformity as opposed to non-conformity.
But that hasn't been decided.
Assuming that's your decision.
But even if that's true, that doesn't really help your case here. That's not taking away. It was always that the setback was always minus the additional 50 feet.
The setback meant that the house had no portion located in a buildable area.
No, it was never that simple.
You're likely to make. We've got over half the house in the buildable area, and over half of our proposed.
Wilder, you can't take credit for that because the regs never put the setback in the condition, assuming we agree that the property was built before existed before 1960. You don't take credit for that as a decreasing nonconformity. It was never conform. It was never that situation.
Well, according to the records in 77, 1984, and the 99 decision, that was the case.
Totally disagree.
We've looked at it. We believe we have a record that says the regulation should apply in this way. And I believe it's appropriate, particularly since all of the neighbors have signed off and have actually encouraged this as the
That's not the standard. You're not answering the question.
Let me jump in here for a second. Gary, the argument I think that is being made is that if we rule that it's a 25-foot setback, they have in fact reduced the nonconformity. And that is a fact, because whether or not it was discussed, it was applied as a 90-foot setback.
Yeah,
the property owner was enforced with a 90-foot setback. And so if we say, oh, you guys screwed up, we're actually reducing the nonconformity that was granted.
I disagree, but he still needs to demonstrate why what's up on the screen now is the minimal adjustment necessary to address.
That's point two. I agree, right? But so I think we can all agree that there's a hardship on this property. And now, Wilder, what I need to understand is why the green boxes, I can get my head around the yellow boxes, but why are the green boxes the minimum adjustment necessary? Why do we need to add additional volume into that setback space?
Well, I think what we anticipate is eventually installing a pool in the backyard. And we need a place to house the pool equipment, so the garage expansion is something we're looking for. And we, the screen porch would be placed over that slight garage expansion. Now, if we had to cut that down, we might be able to cut the screen porch down, but that's the rationale for it. And it was also because we couldn't, under this scenario, this scenario, that was the only logical place to put something. So,
So I would go back to, do you really want us to rule on the 90-foot setback?
I do.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. My recommendation on this application, and you can take another minute to confer with your clients if you'd like, but my recommendation on this application is that we continue it. You show us alternatives envisioning what it would look like if we approve the 25-foot setback. We do have a hearing next week. I don't know how quickly people can tap dance, but it's been calendared, it's been scheduled, and Woody can do his best to get you on that. And I don't really feel like a week's gonna kill any project, especially with the world we live in right now. That being said, it's your and your client's decision. So if you want to take a second to confer with your clients, Wilder, I wouldn't fault you for that. If you do want to do that, I'd like to just switch over to Mr. Tibbetts' application and release him for the evening because he's agreed to a continuance.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to take a pause on 12/20/21, and we are going to pick up 13/20/20, which is the Jones application being presented. Is that by Al?
Yes, it is.
By Al Tibbetts. Al, would you consent to opening that hearing and continuing it till next week?
Yes, I would.
Okay, and you know that Gary Green will not be attending next week's hearing, so you won't get his special brand of love.
You can't forum shop.
He's forum shopping. I see it.
I don't know. I always got a big kick out of Gary.
Now, Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, are you on for the Jones application?
They are here, Mr. Chairman, for an extension request.
Oh, Jesus, I'm so sorry.
Other business. It's other business, but let me just ask, if you're all available except Gary to continue next week, we can probably carry the other business over to next week too and hope we can get Kevin back. But I am concerned about the Silsby and what was the other app? Two we already continued. You're saying you want to pick them up next week instead of September, correct?
If they are available and are prepared to present, I'm willing to hear their application. Mr. Tibbetts, you are free to go for this evening. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. See you later, guys.
Okay.
Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, can you bear with us a little longer, or do you want to wait until next week?
No.
Okay.
No, we'd rather do it tonight if possible.
Okay, we can certainly get it done for you. I just didn't want someone paying for an attorney sitting there, waiting on us to make decisions.
Guys?
So Wilder, are you ready?
We'll take the week.
Okay. So we're going to continue your application till next week. Woody, are we going to be able to fit all this in? You're on mute. There you go.
Woody, before you answer that, we can't add anything. Woody, hang on. We can't add anything in addition to next week other than what we've continued tonight.
Sure.
Correct.
Okay. So
we're not gonna have Gary, so.
Well, we'll miss Gary, of course, but with all that said and understood, I just want to make sure that everyone's clear that nothing is going to be added to the agenda than what's been continued this evening.
Sure. But how are we going to continue? How are we going to continue Zevnik with just 4 members? How are we going to prepare a 5th member to join in Gary's absence?
Well,
we're going to look to.
We're going to have them watch the tape like we normally do, and we're going to follow the procedures we always follow when we have these types of continuances. So
hey, I thought I was chair here.
No, I'm the chair. So I don't want to disadvantage any of these people who have spent a lot of time and energy this evening. It's creeping close to 11 o'clock at night.
They can choose whether they do it next week or if they can get the work done or September.
That is correct. But I want to give that opportunity to everyone that we continue tonight. If they want to go next week, they can go next week. We'll do this again. The Zevniks, I understand it's hard, but it's a 1-week delay, and we're trying to get to the right place.
Yeah, I think we're fine with 1 week. I think waiting till September is probably a little bit problematic, so we'll get it turned around.
Yeah, and look Wilder can explain to you the law on this stuff has changed dramatically, and we're doing the best we can to do the right thing for the people of Darien, but also we have an obligation to do our job, and it's been fairly messy over the last few months for us because there's been a bunch of case law that came out that just basically kneecaps us in these types of decisions.
Yeah, understood. I think we've made the argument as to why we think that there should be exception for this piece of property, and we've spent a tremendous amount of time and effort to go around these issues that you guys have all raised, and so we're certainly keeping that in mind and trying to be conscious of your needs as well. So
I appreciate it. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and continue until next week, Wednesday, what is that, Woody? 21st. Okay.
Yeah, July 21st.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your time this evening. We are going to proceed into deliberations. The deliberations cannot have any public comment, so we will go ahead and deliberate without public comment. And Fred, if you could just take down Wilder's blue screen of death, that would be helpful to me.
Me as well. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you all. Appreciate you staying up late to hear this, and we'll look forward to talking with you next week.
Sounds good. Thank you. We are not done for the evening. We have to go through our deliberations on the application.
Hey, Mike, do you want to do the Morrisons first?
Sure. What's the deal with the Morrisons, Woody?
Sorry,
They've got a complicated
really lovely people who just need more time.
Yeah, they're looking for another 6 months to try to initiate their Prospect Avenue addition project. Basically, that's it.
Sure.
Yeah, I make a motion to approve the 6 months. I apologize for keeping you up this late.
Second, third, and fourth it.
All in favor? Yes, okay.
Barb is saying yes. Good.
You're approved. Dave Keating, you can log off too if you want.
Hi, Morrison. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. Sorry to keep you up so late. Okay, we didn't close Silsby.
We only have
Close-
Corbo.
Yeah, we did.
Corbo, was that the only one we closed?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, I did a terrible job tonight. Sorry, guys.
I wasn't much, sir.
Jeff was part of that, yeah.
Corbo. You know, the only thing that really bothered me is there is a conforming location on the other side of the building. I mean, it almost looks like it's the same room that has a conforming location.
Well, I think, first of all, I think everything in this building is non-conforming. I mean, the whole building is non-conforming. I think it actually
No,
makes.
it's not.
Well, no, because it's an apartment building in a single family zone.
Oh, okay, but as far as the
It's
setback,
height. Right, so that is one of them is a setback. Look, it's actually the best place for this because no one can see it. If you care, if like, it's behind it, again, I know every inch of that property. But to put a dormer overlooking the water company land and then the Norotan River, now I have no idea why that was ever in Stamford because the river hasn't moved. And the river is the boundary between Stamford and Darien. But I would suggest that he build it. I know he won't have drawings, but I think he would build it the same size as the other dormers on the building.
I agree. I like it.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I'm with Gary. I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, me too.
I wish I'd seen drawings, but I think, you know, he's going to make it look right. It's great.
But if we say it has to be of the same dimensions of the other dormers, I think then it becomes a consistent look on that building.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Mike, you okay with that?
yeah, Woody, you're the one I'm worried about the most because you've got to do the zoning enforcement on that.
No, that'd be fine. We just have to stipulate that it doesn't exceed the dimensions of the other 14 or 16 or whatever they are.
And the applicants fine with that. So I'm totally for that. Just make it consistent with the other dormers and I'm fine.
Yeah. So are those dormers in compliance with the height requirements?
I don't think so, but this one is proposed higher in the building than the others. Do you want to stipulate that this one be reduced to no higher than the others?
I think we want the same dimensions as the other dormers on the project. And if that requires a height variance, although we hate granting height variances, in this instance, we would grant a height variance for that particular dormer to be conforming to the rest of the structure.
Right, so that it conforms, right, because the whole building,
right,
okay,
three-story apartment building.
Yeah, I agree. Just let him build exactly what the other dormers look like, the same height. And if he needs a height variance and he needs to come back, I would presume that he'd probably get it. So.
No, I would grant it as part of this. If that.
Oh, you would? Okay.
I'm good. I don't want to bring it back.
But it wasn't.
The whole light saying I try to be nice to people.
Was the height variance, nothing was noticed, right?
Yeah, that's the problem.
What do you mean nothing was noticed?
No, we did. I did put a height variance guesstimation into this.
Okay.
We had some updated survey information after we had to get the legal notice going.
Right. Okay. I'm good.
We'll have to clean this up, but I get the gist. You want to just match the others?
Yep. 100%.
It's a 20.
Height. Yep.
It's a setback and a height variance that they've asked for, and that's what you noticed.
Yeah.
Okay. So with those stipulations, I will make a motion to grant the variance. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Barb is in favor.
Gary? All in favor?
All right.
Okay.
Have anything else to go over tonight, or are we just gonna?
Are we going to start meeting in person? Can we meet in person next time or not?
All right, so we had that on other business. So we got an extension from town council. So just bear with me for a few minutes, guys. Sorry. We got an extension from town council for another, what was it, Woody, 45 days?
Yeah, something like that.
Of this. if we want to go back to in-person, I think it's our prerogative, right? Woody, the town hall's open.
Well, it is your prerogative, and there are some other groups that have done it. One of the glitches is if an applicant or even a board member insists on staying home or working remotely, we have to accommodate that. And we don't have that capability within room 206 here. So we do have a little bit of a glitch, but it would be good to talk about whether you want to go back to live meetings. And then when may be a factor of when we can have the equipment. Okay.
Well, I got to tell you something. You know, tonight, in my opinion, I mean, maybe it's just me. I don't know. It seemed very there seemed to be some discussions that were very complicated. And I think I would have had an easier time understanding and conversing in person.
I agree.
But I would also tell you that this is the first time this has happened in the year and a half or however long we've been doing this darn.
Jeff, I agree completely.
Yeah, this is the first time this has happened to me. I had a really hard time tonight. I don't know why, and I apologize for that. But otherwise, the other nights, I really haven't had a problem at all. This is the first night that when I took that 5-minute break and excused myself, I was saying to myself, geez, I wish I was there, because I just, you know, there was no PowerPoint, there were no cursors, there were no, just the whole thing went sideways. And Mike, it's not your fault. I was no good. My job was no better or no worse or whatever in the first two, because I don't know what happened tonight.
I think tonight was just a bit of an anomaly. Like, it was a bit of a 3-ring circus tonight. Like the applicant in the whole thing with Dave Keating and switching up the order and all of that.
But I also have to say, like, I feel like we, like, at this point, especially attorneys like Maslin and Wilder, they know what we're looking for. We ask the same questions over and over again. Volume in the space, setback, what's the hardship? I mean, this should be the starting presentation. Here's the hardship. Here's the, here's how much out of the, whatever it is. Like, I just don't understand why it's so disorganized at this point.
I'll tell you why, because there's no actual basis to grant any of these variances. And that's the reality. There's like none of these should be approved. And Gary, I think you pointed out the best. Like, the minimum adjustment necessary is a fiction when you're asking for a screened porch for a pool.
Yeah, that's subjective, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that's how these applications get so perverted and sidetracked.
So let's go back to, I think in person is better, but this does provide flexibility for me in particular. I don't know if anyone else does this. I'm in New Hampshire and I can participate tonight.
That's awesome. No, I don't do that. I'm sitting
Hey,
in my
can you participate on a sailboat?
See that? But just so you know, there's no wind tonight. The race got canceled, so I missed nothing. But I got here with you guys.
Well, so if we're in person, can Gary call in on Zoom?
No, we don't have that capability yet.
Okay. When you're in person, you're in person. Okay. Anyway, I'm not going to object to being there. I mean, I think by this time, if we can all go to restaurants, as the CEO of Morgan Stanley said, we can all go to room 206 or 216, whatever it is.
If I was to make a motion, I think I would make a motion to say, next week at home or remote. God bless you for being in New Hampshire, Garrett. But I think September 22nd, everybody's being called back to the office after Labor Day. I think we should set an example. I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, and Mike, you can yell at me in the morning, but maybe we should think about going back September 22nd. I mean, everyone's going back day after Labor Day. My entire family's going back day after Labor Day.
Yep, I'm on board 100%.
So, and I see Dan shaking yes, and I don't know. That's just my feeling. I think we should set an example.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's do that, Woody. That'll be our plan.
Okay.
And then if there are applications where we run into technical difficulties that we have to do remote, then we'll do those remote. Right?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Woody, can I interject here? Did you say something about a TV or something being set up at Town Hall 2060 that can happen? Well, what's that all about?
Yes, there's a plan to install equipment in 206, including large screens, calling capability, so remote people could join our live meetings. So it's called a hybrid.
Can you do me a favor? I seem to remember your email saying that the equipment's been ordered. Would you check with Jamie's office and let me and Mike know when that equipment's going to be set up? Because I'd like that equipment. I mean, it'd be great, excuse me. It'd be great if that equipment was set up by September 22nd. So if in fact we had a remote applicant, we had that availability. Can you look into that maybe?
Yeah, I actually did a couple days ago. I asked the Public Works Director, and he said that the trigger is about to be pulled to authorize him to have the contractors do the work. And I think the equipment has already been ordered, so probably close. But does that mean it's going to be actually functional September? I don't know. But we can start pushing because you've indicated a goal to go back to live meetings. But next week we'll have to do another go too.
Yeah. So what's the date for next week? Are we talking about Wednesday or Thursday?
Wednesday.
Yeah, okay. Because I think Thursday there is an issue with they moved the firework to Thursday now, right? They're in firework from the 15th.
Oh no, really?
All the meetings that were
Yeah, they did move.
I read something, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah,
Mike can answer that question.
Yeah, Wednesday is good.
Change it
What else?
days.
What
They
else?
changed it. Yeah, they changed it to Thursday, the 22nd.
Okay. All right, so at least 4 of you can come back next Wednesday. We've got some work to do to get things set up with the go-to and all that.
Yeah, and Woody,
we also got to get Kevin on board.
Yeah, Kevin or Bill to fill in and make sure they watch the tape of tonight. And Gary's, maybe Gary, you want to give whomever's going to fill in for you a call so they can replicate your ire.
Thoughtfulness.
Gary, I thought you were great tonight.
Guys, I will make a motion to close the hearing or meeting.
Close the meeting, yeah.
All right, I'm in. Barb says yes.
Seconded by Gary, all in favor. Everyone's in favor.
Bye.
Have a great night, guys.
Night, everyone.
Thanks, guys.